At a quiet train crossing, a young woman with short, light hair speaks to her dark-haired companion. She apologizes for dragging him out, explaining that since he's been alone for a while, she hoped to lift his spirits. Noticing his silence, she brightly suggests he must be thirsty and offers to go buy him a drink. Suddenly, his eyes widen in terror. He screams a warning as the massive grille of a truck appears, bearing down on the girl. Without a second thought, he lunges forward, shoving her out of the path of the vehicle just as it's about to strike. His consciousness flickers. A distant scream echoes as his vision slowly returns, focusing on unfamiliar leaves and branches. Disoriented, he weakly questions where he could possibly be. He finds himself sprawled precariously on the thick limb of a massive tree. Panic and confusion set in as he shouts into the empty air, wondering how and why he is high up in a tree. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as he tries to process his situation. Recalling the moments before, the truck, the impact, a single unbelievable possibility comes to mind. He wonders if this is heaven. His eyes dart, a new thought taking hold. He questions his initial assumption. Maybe he isn't dead after all. Pushing the existential questions aside, an intense thirst grips him. He scans his surroundings from the branch, his gaze falling upon a welcome sight. A river flowing through the dense woods below. Having made his way down, he kneels at the water's edge, cupping the cool liquid in his hands and splashing it eagerly onto his face. The feeling of the water, the simple fact of being, overwhelms him. He lets out a cry of pure relief, kneeling on the riverbank, exclaiming that he is alive again. But as he stands and takes in the vast, mountainous landscape, a profound realization dawns on him. The scenery, the sensation of the water on his skin, it all feels exactly the same as it did when he was alive. The relief gives way to a deeper confusion. He touched his own face, a sense of disbelief washing over him. Though he had no idea where he was, one thing seemed certain. He was alive. His gaze then lifted, settling on a structure nestled among the trees. It was a small log cabin. Cautiously, he approached the dwelling and peered through the open doorway, calling out to see if anyone was home. Receiving no answer, he stepped inside. The interior was coated in a thick layer of dust, from the kitchen to the hearth, suggesting it had been abandoned for some time. Despite feeling like an intruder, he decided to rest there for a while. The quiet of the cabin was soon broken by the rumbling of his stomach. He was famished and hoped to find some preserved food, but his eyes then fell upon something far more useful, a fishing rod. With a renewed sense of purpose, he decided to go fishing immediately. He ran from the cabin towards the nearby water, remembering that the best bait could be found by turning over rocks along the shore. It didn't take long to find a suitable grub. He carefully threaded it onto the hook, preparing his line. With his bait set, he took a firm stance, swung the rod back, and cast the line far out into the water. The hook and bait sailed through the air before landing with a soft splash, sending ripples across the water surface. Almost instantly, the line went taut. He had a bite already. With a powerful heave, he fought against the pull as an enormous, unusual-looking fish erupted from the water, its scales flashing in the light. He yanks the line with a final, triumphant heave, landing the bizarre, spotted fish on the rocky shore. With a cry of victory, he celebrates his success. His celebration is cut short by a strange, disembodied sound. He freezes, his eyes wide with confusion, wondering what he just heard. He realizes the sound wasn't external, but a voice inside his own head, announcing that his fishing level had increased from 1 to 3. Utterly baffled, he questions the strange phenomenon. In response to his confusion, a translucent panel materializes in the air before him, displaying a series of complex, circular charts. He stares in astonishment, completely taken aback by the impossible sight. The panel clearly displays the same message he heard in his mind. His fishing skill level had indeed increased from 1 to 3. He struggles to comprehend the meaning of a fishing skill. The only logical conclusion he can draw is that the simple act of catching a fish somehow caused this level up. Though he doesn't fully understand what's happening, a more pressing need takes over: hunger. Realizing one fish won't be enough, he turns back to the water with renewed determination, casting his line once more to catch a few more. Almost immediately, the water churns with activity as his line goes taut again. He successfully lands 3 more of the strange creatures. A grin spreads across his face as he congratulates himself on his beginner's luck, though he can't help but notice the alien appearance of his catch. He crouches, examining the fish, the undeniable evidence of this strange new reality laid out before him. After a moment of contemplation, he pushes his questions aside. Survival comes first. Clutching his meal, he breaks into a run, focused on one thing: it's time to eat. He recalls the flint by the hearth and the firewood he saw stacked behind the cabin, realizing he has what he needs to cook his catch. After preparing the meal, he gazes at the perfectly cooked fish, his eyes wide with excitement as he exclaims how delicious it looks. Eagerly, he takes a large bite, only to find it still incredibly hot. He pulls back for a moment, tending to the small fire he built. He settles down, crouching as he savors his meal. A sudden alert catches him off guard, making him wonder what's happening since he isn't actively doing anything. A familiar holographic screen materializes, announcing a significant jump in his cooking skill from level 1 to 5. The realization that everything might level up dawns on him. He quickly dismisses the thought, urging himself to focus on his meal before the fish he worked so hard for gets cold. With renewed focus, he takes another hearty bite of the fish, determined to enjoy it. Despite its somewhat rough appearance, The taste is incredible. He celebrates his success, overjoyed by the delicious meal. His thoughts briefly drift to the image of the city he saw earlier on the screen. His celebration is cut short by a strange rustling sound from the direction of the woodpile. He freezes, turning his head to identify the source. As he approaches the stacked logs, a monstrous, tusked boar with a dark, spiky mane reveals itself. His eyes widen in terror at the sight of the creature. The beast lets out a guttural roar and charges. He stumbles backward, falling to the ground in sheer panic, screaming as the creature closes in. He recoiled in terror, realizing the boar was not just defensive, but filled with a furious rage as it charged directly toward him. Desperately searching for a way to protect himself, his eyes landed on a large metal trash can nearby. He needed something, anything, to use as a shield. With no time to spare, he seized the lid, bracing himself just as the creature slammed into it with immense force. The impact sent him staggering backward, the metal groaning under the strain. He understood with chilling certainty that this beast was serious about killing him. He had to take it down, or he was finished. His gaze then fell upon a small axe lying on the ground. That was it. Though he had no idea if he could use it effectively, he knew he had to try. He locked eyes with the boar, preparing for his next move. As the beast charged once more, he leaped into the air, twisting his body to bring the axe down hard on its head. The creature let out a final, piercing squeal. The boar collapsed to the ground, motionless. He stood over it, raising his arms in a brief, triumphant cheer before letting out a long, shaky sigh of relief. His moment of peace was shattered by a series of familiar chimes as notifications flooded his senses. Axe skill, strength, HP, stamina. Overwhelmed, he clutched his head, wishing the incessant alerts would stop. He managed to push the noise aside, his gaze falling upon the massive carcass. He had survived. A profound sense of relief washed over him. With this much meat, he wouldn't have to worry about food for a while. It had been a long time since he'd felt this way. This feeling gave way to a quiet realization. He was alone again. He acknowledged that it was nice his social anxiety wasn't acting up, but the thought trailed off, leaving an unspoken sense of unease hanging in the air. He suddenly feels a wave of exhaustion wash over him. Then his eyes land on a nearby metal drum, and he remembers what was under the lid. A realization dawns. He could take a bath. The idea invigorates him. He exclaims with delight, picturing himself filling the drum with river water, heating it, and enjoying a proper bath, a concept he's only ever seen in videos. To heat the water, he first needs firewood. With a determined cry, he sets to work, striking a large log with his axe. With a wide, exhilarated grin, he brings the axe down again and again, splitting the wood with each forceful swing. He steps back to admire the large pile of firewood he has created. His thoughts immediately turn to his new reality, wondering just how many levels this manual labor will earn him. Next, he grabs a wooden bucket and runs towards the river to fetch the water for his bath. After filling the large metal drum, he lets out a sigh of relief. He muses to himself that even a simple task like taking a bath requires a great deal of effort in this primitive lifestyle. His moment of rest is interrupted by a sudden thought. He turns, remembering the boar he killed earlier and realizing with a start that the meat will go bad if he doesn't deal with it soon. He approaches the massive creature's body and sits before it, offering a quiet prayer for its rest. He resolves to butcher the carcass while his bath heats up, vowing to make sure none of the meat goes to waste. As he raises his axe to begin the task, a new notification appears before him, announcing the acquisition of a butchering skill. He nods in understanding, accepting this new development as he prepares to strike. He puts his new butchering skill to use, grateful for the survival videos he once watched. With practice motions, he begins to process the boar carcass by the river, planning to soak the cuts of meat in a hemp sack to preserve them for the coming days. With the task complete, the thought of a bath comes to mind. He suddenly remembers that he lacks basic conveniences like a towel and decides he should check the nearby cabin just in case. Inside, he searches for a drawer and checks beneath the bed. To his delight, he discovers a pair of towels. Though smaller than proper bath towels, he is overjoyed, realizing they are far better than nothing. His search yields another discovery. 2 sets of clothes hanging nearby. He observes that they resemble something a medieval farmer might wear, but quickly decides that he is in no position to be picky. Standing beside the barrel of heated water, he can no longer contain his anticipation. After testing the water with his hand and finding the temperature perfect, he begins to undress. He sinks into the warm water with an immense sigh of relief. Submerged in the barrel, a wide grin spreads across his face as he declares it the best feeling imaginable. As he soaks, a thought surfaces. The concept of leveling up from games comes to mind, and he begins to connect it to his recent experiences. The full weight of this realization settles upon him. Looking out at the unfamiliar sky, he questions what has happened to him and comes to a stark conclusion. This isn't Earth. He leans back, splashing the barrel. Despite the bewildering situation, he finds comfort in the simple pleasures. The food is good, and the bath feels wonderful. His contemplation shifts to resolve. Deciding there's no use overthinking his predicament, he embraces the fact that he is alive. With renewed determination, he vows to survive in this new world and makes a plan to start exploring the area the next day. In a sun-dappled forest, a young man with dark hair takes a moment to appreciate his work, a basket filled with freshly gathered mushrooms. He sighs in satisfaction, pleased with the large quantity he has managed to find. His brief respite is shattered by the appearance of a familiar threat, a pack of large, aggressive boars. His expression hardens as he recognizes them. He remarks with annoyance that it has been a month since he defeated their kin, yet they continue to challenge him, questioning if they ever learn. Startled by their sudden charge, he drops his hard-earned collection, the mushrooms scattering across the forest floor as he prepares for the inevitable confrontation. From behind the smaller beasts, a truly massive boar emerges, its size dwarfing the others. The young man realizes they have brought their boss this time. Unfazed, he accepts the challenge, ready to discover just how strong this new foe is. The giant boar attacks with ferocious speed, its tusks catching him and launching him violently into the air. As he tumbles, he understands that a direct hit from such a creature would be catastrophic. The ground cracks from the sheer force of the impact. He lands on his feet and immediately sprints away, a plan forming in his mind. He calls out to the beast, acknowledging its good reactions to side attacks, but confidently stating that he has already identified its weakness. Using a thick tree trunk as a foothold, he propels himself high into the air, positioning himself directly above the charging boar. He knows the creature is terribly vulnerable to attacks from above. From this vantage point, he plunges downward, weapon first. He declares the boar's weakness aloud, bringing his full weight and force down upon its exposed back. The decisive blow lands, and the massive beast crashes to the ground, defeated. The remaining smaller boars watch in stunned silence, their bodies twitching in fear at the fall of their leader. Turning to the terrified survivors, he brandishes his weapon and shouts, demanding to know if they finally understand the futility of their actions. He admonishes them not to waste their lives, punctuating his lecture with a comical snort. He stands over the massive carcass of the boar leader, noting its size with satisfaction. With this much meat, he won't have to worry about food for a while. As he contemplates his prize, a faint, desperate scream for help echoes from the distance. The cry cuts through the quiet forest, making him pause. He questions if he heard someone calling for help, and then realizes with certainty that the sound is coming from deeper within the woods. Without hesitation, he pinpoints the direction of the sound, grabs his weapon, and breaks into a full sprint through the trees. He moves swiftly, scaling a steep rock face to gain a higher vantage point over the surrounding area. From the clifftop, his eyes widen in shock. Below, a group of travelers is completely surrounded by a horde of aggressive boars, fighting a desperate battle. Amidst the chaos, a terrified young woman in a maid's uniform screams for help. A guard nearby urgently shouts for the ladies to get back. The guards form a protective line, shielding the women from the charging beasts. One of them declares with resolve that they will handle the threat. A young noblewoman looks over her shoulder, her expression one of pure panic. She cries out that there are too many of them, and worse, they're trapped against a sheer rock face with no escape. Steeling themselves, the guards stand shoulder to shoulder, swords at the ready. As a unit, they acknowledge their captain's orders. The captain watches the boars begin their charge, his face grim. He bellows a final command to his men. Don't let a single one through. His men are sent flying by the charging boars, their desperate cries echoing in the clearing. The captain can only watch, his expression grim as his forces are overwhelmed. Before another blow can land, a young man steps between the guards and the beasts. Annoyed, he addresses the boars directly, questioning if they never learn and threatening to turn them all into stakes. The effect is instantaneous. The entire horde of boars stops in its tracks, now docile and lined up before him. The guards and the noblewoman are left dumbfounded by the sudden shift. The young man, seemingly surprised himself, turns to the group and asks if they are all right. He stares intently at the newcomer, wondering who he could possibly be. The young man simply stands his ground, remarking to himself that these creatures tend to challenge anyone indiscriminately. The guard captain approaches, expressing his gratitude for being saved. Flustered by the formality, the young man bows deeply in a panic, insisting that he did nothing special. As he remains bowed, a strange message materializes in his vision, indicating an intimidation skill. Just then, the noblewoman walks toward him. He straightens up, a bead of sweat on his face, as she closes the distance. She observes him with a thoughtful, almost appraising gaze. She places a hand over her heart, her expression serious as she begins to formally express her gratitude for his intervention. Her words are cut short by a loud, persistent ringing that only the young man seems to hear. He clutches his head, shouting in frustration that he gets it and for the noise to stop, startling the noblewoman. He quickly apologizes for his outburst, asking if everyone is uninjured. The noblewoman remarks on how astonishingly fast his level is increasing. The guard captain then introduces himself as Garrett, explaining that they are travelers who became lost. The young man is taken aback, realizing it's a first for him to meet other people in this area. He speaks up, a bead of sweat on his temple, introducing himself as Kazuma and stating that he has something to ask the travelers. Kazuma stands before the guard captain and the noblewoman, having just explained his solitary situation in a vast wilderness. In response, the captain's face contorts with disbelief. He roars, questioning how Kazuma could have possibly been alone in the forest this entire time. He quickly composes himself, apologizing to Kazuma before asking for a moment to speak privately with his companions. Kazuma agrees, looking on with a puzzled expression. Turning to the noblewoman, the captain suggests they ask Kazuma to be their guide. He reasons that the young man doesn't seem to be one of Bergen's men and clearly knows the forest well. The noblewoman listens intently, agreeing with his assessment. She adds that, judging by how he helped them earlier, he seems to be a good person. Deciding to handle the matter herself, she announces that she will be the one to ask him. As she approaches Kazuma, her eyes widen. She points to an earring he's wearing, exclaiming in surprise as she touches the choker around her own neck. His face lights up with childlike excitement. He pulls a large ruby pendant from beneath his shirt, declaring that it matches her jewelry. The noblewoman observes that it is a very rare and grand ruby. The sight of the massive, intricately cut gem leaves both the noblewoman and the captain speechless. The captain leans in, his eyes wide, declaring that he has never seen a grand ruby of such a magnificent size before. His disbelief turns to suspicion. He demands to know where Kazuma acquired such a thing, questioning if he is some kind of royalty. Flustered, Kazuma covers his mouth and admits that he made it himself, noting that the base was particularly difficult to craft. He nervously scratches his cheek as Garrett presses him, not about whether he made the pendant himself, but more importantly, where he got the red stone. In response, Kazuma simply points up a path ahead. He explains that there's a rock crevice nearby, which leads to a cave, and that is where the gems can be found. Garrett reacts with stunned disbelief, stammering at the possibility of a grand ruby deposit. Kazuma calmly confirms this, adding that while he hasn't counted, a quick glance at the walls suggests an incredible quantity. He estimates there might be about 1,000. The number sends a shockwave through the entire party. Garrett roars the figure back in astonishment, his hair seeming to stand on end, while the noblewoman and her attendants gasp. The captain quickly regains his composure. He apologizes for the abruptness of his request, but asks Kazuma if he would be willing to guide them there. Kazuma agrees readily, noting only that it's a bit of a distance and that he'll need to fetch some torches from his cabin. After retrieving the supplies, he leads the entire party to the base of a rocky cliff face. He gestures toward a dark, narrow opening, announcing that this is the entrance. Peering into the darkness, Garrett remarks that he understands now. Hidden so deep in the forest and beyond a rock crevice, it's no wonder no one has discovered the place before. Once inside the passage, however, Kazuma stumbles, catching himself against the rough wall. He pauses, taking a deep, steadying breath, as if the air itself is difficult to inhale. The unstable ground causes Garrett to cry out as he slips and falls to his hands. Holding a newly lit torch, Kazuma turns to check on him, warning the group to be careful of the slippery footing. From deeper within the cave, a strange clacking sound echoes. With the torch held high to illuminate the oppressive darkness, he leads the party onward through the winding passage, announcing that their destination is just ahead. A sudden noise from the shadows ahead stops him in his tracks, his eyes widening in alarm. He identifies the source as a lizard. Garrett, from behind, sounds relieved, questioning why he'd be so startled by a simple reptile when he'd feared another boar. But the massive claw visible on the cave wall suggests this is no ordinary creature. He stares up as the torchlight fully illuminates the creature before them. It's a massive reptilian beast with thick, rock-like plating. Garrett recognizes it immediately, shouting that it's a duper baiter, a ferocious B-rank monster. The duper baiter lunges with startling speed, its massive clawed hands swinging down towards him. Garrett screams for everyone to run away. Garrett believes the creature is too powerful for them to handle. But as the monster collapses, Kazuma lets out a defiant roar, bracing for the impact that sends him skidding backward. The captain can only watch, his face a mask of shock. The beast's claws slam into Kazuma's side, but instead of tearing flesh, they shatter against his body as if striking solid steel. With its primary weapon destroyed, the duper baiter lies stunned on the cave floor. Kazuma approaches it calmly and, with a single powerful kick, sends the creature hurtling into a deep chasm. Its shriek echoes as it plummets into the darkness. He turns back to the astonished captain and his men, casually remarking that lizard meat is delicious and they should retrieve the body on their way out. He then cheerfully announces that they're almost there. His complete lack of concern leaves Garrett reeling. Watching the boy walk on as if nothing happened, the captain is forced to confront a startling realization. This boy is some kind of monster. Garrett and his soldiers stare down in disbelief. Kazuma, looking up at them from the cavern floor, announces that he has put what they dug up into a single bag. The contents spill out, a massive pile of glittering grand rubies. The soldiers cry out in amazement. Garrett, holding a handful of the large gems, confirms their authenticity in immense quantity. Kazuma smiles, asking if Garrett believes him now. His expression hardening, Garrett states that he has an important matter to discuss. In response, Kazuma cheerfully offers him some of the rubies. The casual offer stuns Garrett, who shouts in disbelief. Kazuma, tilting his head, admits that he doesn't really understand their value. This admission leaves Garrett speechless. He declares himself in Lord Kazuma's debt, explaining that discovering this vein is a monumental event for his country. A female soldier asks if he is certain, and Kazuma gives a simple, smiling confirmation. He then encourages Garrett to take as much as he likes, stating that such a fortune should be enough to restore his country. Garrett listens, his expression a mixture of shock and hope. The phrase, "your country," seems to catch Kazuma by surprise. He turns back toward Garrett, his expression shifting to one of quiet contemplation. A moment later, A smile of understanding spreads across his face. He realizes they must be volunteer soldiers and wishes them success in their efforts to rebuild. With the matter settled, he bends to lift a heavy sack of gems. He suggests they all work together to carry the treasure to the entrance, confident that it will be a quick task if they cooperate. He looked up as a young woman with long, flowing hair addressed him as Lord Kazuma. After a moment of hesitation, she declared that she also had a request to make. As he continued the work of gathering the heavy sacks of treasure, she posed her question. Would he consider traveling with them for a while? He paused, his eyes wide with surprise. The request was for him, and he questioned it aloud. In response, she gently took his hand. The sudden, unexpected contact left him momentarily flustered and speechless. She leaned in, explaining the gravity of their situation. They were being pursued by dangerous people for certain reasons, she confessed, and having someone as reliable as him with them would be an immense reassurance. She pleaded with him to join them. Her earnest plea sent him into deep thought. It was the first time in his life that he had ever been needed by others in such a way. Beyond that, another powerful motivator surfaced within him. His own burgeoning curiosity about the world that existed outside. With these thoughts swirling, he lowered his gaze to contemplate the decision. The young woman watched him, her expression tense with anticipation. After a moment, he looked up with a smile and agreed to her request, at least for a while. The woman's face lit up with joy, and Garrett expressed his profound thanks, stating that they were counting on him. With the matter settled, the group finished their work, Garrett confirming that everything was packed. As Kazuma effortlessly hoisted a heavy sack onto his shoulder, his gaze suddenly snapped to the side, his attention caught by something unseen. He stares in wide-eyed shock at the source of the disturbance. A nearby guard, seeing his expression, asks what's wrong. Kazuma can only shout in alarm, pointing at the newcomer. The cause of his terror is a monstrous giant, towering over the trees. The noblewoman and her retinue cry out for Lord Kazuma's aid as he and the others stare up, frozen by the creature's sheer scale. One of the guards, a man with an eye patch, recognizes the beast, his voice strained as he names it, a Tataros. The rest of the party looks on, their faces a mixture of shock and fear. The revelation spreads panic through the ranks. A Tataros is an A-rank monster. The guards yell for everyone to retreat, scattering in the face of the threat. Kazuma, however, remains rooted to the spot, questioning if he has the strength to face a creature he has never seen before. As he contemplates his chances, the guard captain, Garrett, takes command, leading his soldiers in a desperate charge against the colossal foe. He raises his simple tool, preparing to enter the fray, but a voice urgently calls out to him. The guard warns him to wait, explaining that the difference in power between an A-rank and a B-rank monster is immense. The Tataros seems to grin with malevolent confidence. The captain reinforces the warning, shouting that engaging such a high-ranked beast is pure recklessness. But instead of pressing its attack, the giant creature simply plops down onto the ground with a heavy thud. Kazuma observes this strange behavior, a look of mild disgust on his face. He tightens his grip on his tool, assessing the situation. He realizes that even with his full strength, his attack would likely do nothing. A thought crosses his mind. The creature is completely ignoring him, underestimating him. This perceived slight is immediately followed by a lethal threat. The Tataros raises its enormous foot, intending to crush him. The guard captain screams his name in warning, but Kazuma's eyes narrow, his fear replaced by a sudden, sharp focus. He refuses to be crushed, dodging the giant's descending foot with a defiant shout. Lunging forward, he lands a sharp blow against the monster's massive leg. The attack, though minor, enrages the beast. It clenches a fist the size of a boulder and brings it crashing down, forcing the young man to evade once more. He lands nimbly on a piece of shattered earth, his mind racing. A grim realization solidifies in his thoughts. This is not an opponent he can defeat with a single strike. The creature's sheer presence is overwhelming. Its immense strength is matched by a terrifying speed, utterly belying its colossal frame. Faced with such a foe, he understands that a prolonged battle is his only option. He steels himself for what that will entail, knowing he has no choice but to drag the fight out. With his strategy set, he becomes a whirlwind of motion, weaving around the giant's legs and landing a flurry of strikes. With each blow, he realizes his own level should continue to increase. His escalating prowess does not go unnoticed. From a safe distance, Garrett expresses his disbelief at the reckless display, but the guard beside him points out the undeniable truth. Lord Kazuma's movements are becoming quicker and faster. The giant roars in frustration, unable to land a decisive blow on its nimble opponent. Kazuma continues his relentless assault, his power swelling with each successful strike he lands. He presses his advantage, delivering a powerful strike that sends the behemoth staggering to its knees. Seeing his opportunity, he shouts in triumph and leaps high into the air, preparing for a finishing blow. From the apex of his jump, he descends like a hawk, channeling all his accumulated power into a single, decisive strike aimed at the monster's vital point. His final blow lands, and a massive Tataros dissolves into black smoke, dissipating across the rocky ground. The guard captain, Garrett, stares in utter disbelief, his voice a strained whisper as he processes what he just witnessed. Kazuma defeated an A-rank monster entirely on his own. He approaches the young man, who now kneels on the ground, catching his breath. Garrett offers an apology for the imposition, but makes a formal request to see Kazuma's status. Kazuma agrees, mentioning an annoying screen he'd been ignoring. In response, Kazuma conjures a glowing status screen before them. As Garrett and the noblewoman lean in for a closer look, the captain's eye widens in shock. Kazuma explains that he had ignored it for some time, finding the constant pinging sound it made to be an annoyance. The screen displays a single, staggering piece of information, level 259. The number hangs in the air, a silent testament to an impossible feat. The revelation leaves them all momentarily stunned. Garrett is the first to speak, the pieces clicking into place. He concludes that such a level must mean Kazuma is a powerful A-rank adventurer, which would explain his incredible strength. He leans in close to the captain, a thoughtful expression on his face. He remarks that his own level is more than double Garrett's, which he correctly identifies as 102, then turns the question back on the captain, wondering aloud how a man of his age could have reached such a high level. The noblewoman interrupts, her curiosity piqued. She asks Kazuma what kind of experiences could possibly lead to attaining such an astronomical level. He pauses for a moment, then gestures towards the landscape, offering to provide an example. He points toward a distant cliff face, drawing their attention to a specific rock formation shaped uncannily like a rabbit's head. After they confirm they see it, he bends down and picks up a small, ordinary stone from the ground. "Watch this," he says, as the others look on with uncertainty. As they question his intent, he rears back and hurls the small stone. It shoots through the air like a projectile, a blur of motion aimed directly at the distant cliff. His throw sent the small stone hurtling through the air with incredible speed, leaving his companions, Garrett and the noblewoman, staring in stunned silence. The action immediately yielded a result. A notification declared that his stone-throwing skill had increased from level 2 to 11. Garrett was aghast, wondering how a single throw could increase his skill level by 9. Without pause, Kazuma picked up another stone, announcing his intention to throw a second one. This second projectile soared through the sky and struck the distant cliff face, shattering a chunk of rock upon impact. The display of power left all three of them momentarily speechless. Garrett covered his mouth, his eyes wide with disbelief. Another notification confirmed the unbelievable. His stone-throwing skill had now jumped from level 11 to 23. The noblewoman remarked that his first throw hadn't even reached the cliff, while Kazuma internally noted that the distance and speed were on a completely different level than before. He turned to the still-stunned Garrett and offered a simple explanation. He might just level up more easily than other people. Garrett processed this understatement, his mind racing with the implications. He recognized Kazuma as an incredible talent, realizing what a powerful asset he would be if they could secure him on their side. His train of thought was broken as the noblewoman suddenly turned towards him, calling out to Lord Kazuma with newfound urgency. She faced Kazuma, her expression resolute. She declared firmly that she had made up her mind, leaving him to ask what she meant. She turned to Kazuma, her expression serious. She recalled her earlier request for him to join them for a while, but now she had a new proposal. Would he consider becoming their permanent ally and traveling with them from this point forward? She continued, admitting that her request was incredibly presumptuous, particularly after his generosity with the Grand Rubies. She confessed that, in all honesty, they were in a situation where they needed every ally they could find. Her voice trailed off as she began to second-guess herself, murmuring that, of course, an A-rank adventurer would have no reason to travel with those of a lower rank. Before she could finish the thought, Kazuma's voice cut in, clear and decisive. "Yes, that's fine." He elaborated with a confident smile, explaining that he knows more about this area than they do. Furthermore, he couldn't bring himself to abandon them, especially knowing they were being pursued. Both Garrett and the noblewoman stared, taken aback by his sudden declaration. He then formally accepted their offer, adding, "If you'll have me." A moment later, flustered by their stunned silence, he stammered, asking what they had just said, before quickly reaffirming his acceptance. The noblewoman and Garrett could only ask if he was truly okay with the arrangement. He confirmed his decision with a determined yes, and, bowing his head slightly, promised to do his best to protect everyone. In response, Garrett bowed deeply, expressing that they all looked forward to working with him. With the agreement settled, the tension broke. The noblewoman beamed with genuine delight, while Kazuma turned his head aside, a bashful but pleased smile on his face. As the party traveled, the guards watched in awe of Lord Kazuma's incredible movements, slashing through foes left and right. He, however, appeared flustered by their praise. He insisted that he was just desperately doing what he could, swinging his twin pickaxes with frantic energy. His assault came to a sudden stop when one of the tools shattered against a tough hide, leaving him staring in shock. The guard with the eye patch lamented the loss of his partner, the broken pickaxe, while noting Kazuma's impressive continuous subjugation streak against monsters like a duplicator and a Tataros. Kazuma could only kneel on the ground, staring at his ruined weapon. Seeing him, Garrett suggested he must have reached his limit. The noblewoman disagreed, stating it was all right. While Garrett acknowledged how much Kazuma had already helped, she insisted they would need to rely on his strength going forward and offered to give him her own power instead. She elaborated on her reasoning to Garrett, revealing a status display showing Kazuma's level as 259, the highest in the party. Considering his immense attack power, she argued that the best solution for the group was to enhance that power even further. Pressing her point, She challenged Garrett directly, asking if he truly believed they could overcome the journey ahead without Kazuma. The question gave the captain pause, his hand clenching into a fist as he considered her words. He relented. Apologizing for his rudeness, Garrett agreed to prepare. With a satisfied smile, the noblewoman declared that in that case, they must do everything they can. His expression shifted to one of concern. He looked at the noblewoman and asked what, precisely, she meant by that. Meanwhile, Kazuma was still kneeling, examining the splintered handle of his broken pickaxe. A voice called his name, telling him to please stay still for a moment. He stands confused as the noblewoman holds a sword near his neck, apologizing for involving him in her affairs, but assuring him it will be over soon. The guard captain, Garrett, looks on with concern, asking what has happened. She then formally requests that from this point forward, he continue to lend them his aid. Her gaze is steady, and Garrett watches the exchange with a serious expression. His response is immediate and enthusiastic. With a determined look, he agrees, promising to do his very best. With his agreement secured, the noblewoman offers him a sheathed sword, suggesting it as a replacement for his axe. He accepts the weapon with wide-eyed surprise, questioning if it is truly all right for him to have it. His hands close around the hilt. Drawing the blade, he is overcome with awe, exclaiming that it is amazing and incredibly shiny. His excitement grows as Garrett presents him with a set of armor as well. Though the captain calls it ordinary, Kazuma shouts his thanks, completely overwhelmed by the gifts. As Garrett helps him don the new gear, the noblewoman quietly remarks that the equipment is nothing compared to the grand rubies he gave them. She seems lost in thought for a moment before dismissing it. Fully equipped, Kazuma marvels at how light the armor is, feeling confident that he will now be safe even against high-rank monsters. The noblewoman smiles at his determination, but Garrett's attention is suddenly drawn to something in the distance. His confident declaration is cut short as Garrett points ahead, announcing that he can see a town. The other guards identify it as the town of Mariza, expressing relief that their long journey might finally afford them a proper meal. He laughed along with Kazuma's cheerful suggestion to find a restaurant and eat their fill. The idea was met with a boisterous cheer from one of his men, though Kazuma himself seemed momentarily surprised by the enthusiastic outburst. His amusement quickly vanished, replaced by stern focus. He reminded the group not to let their guard down, as they had no way of knowing where enemies might be lurking. At his sharp command, the party turned their attention to him, awaiting instructions. One of the guards asked what the plan was from here, and the others affirmed their readiness to follow his lead. He addressed the noblewoman directly, outlining the first step. Their initial objective was to purchase a carriage and horses within the town. She calmly agreed. She then turned her attention to Kazuma. She explained that she and the other ladies would be riding in the carriage and formally requested that he act as their guard. Garrett continued to elaborate on the strategy. After securing their transport, they would all procure disguises. The plan was to pose as merchants from the barn trading company of the neighboring Old Anna Kingdom. The only exception would be Kazuma, whose identity was already unknown in these parts. Kazuma quickly voiced his understanding. The noblewoman processed this information, acknowledging the logic. If they were disguised as merchants from Old Anna, their presence in this region would not seem out of place. She confirmed that she understood. Furthermore, by using the name of a famous and reputable organization like the Barn Trading Company, they would be far less likely to arouse any suspicion from local authorities or potential threats. With all the details settled, the noblewoman gave her final approval, stating that this was the plan. Garrett acknowledged her command, while Kazuma looked on, a bead of sweat on his temple revealing a hint of apprehension. The plan now in motion, the group proceeded through a large set of doors into what appeared to be a stable or warehouse. As they entered, a figure standing guard by the entrance announced that they had arrived. Inside a bustling eatery, the disguised group blends in with the chattering crowd. Kazuma stands hesitantly while his companions, cloaked in hooded robes, find their place among the other patrons. From outside, Garrett observes their surroundings, remarking that although they are disguised as merchants, their large, hooded group still draws attention. He notices Kazuma's worried expression and dismisses his concerns with a wide grin. Garrett declares that it's not a problem and enthusiastically tells everyone to eat their fill while they have the chance. Following his command, the entire party dives into a lavish feast, consuming the food with unrestrained energy. As Kazuma eats, a waitress encourages him to have more. He gratefully accepts, thanking her for the meal amidst mouthfuls. He finishes, letting out a satisfied sigh. The plates before him are picked clean, a testament to the deliciousness of the food. His brief moment of peace is shattered by a commotion outside. A troop of armored soldiers on horseback clatters into the town square, their sudden arrival silencing the crowd. Their leader bellows an order, announcing that they have information about wanted individuals and demanding that any citizen with leads report to them immediately. As he speaks, his men begin tossing wanted posters into the air. One flutters down from the sky and lands face up on the floor near the group's table. The poster reveals the target of the manhunt. It bears the unmistakable likeness of a noblewoman, who pulls back her hood in shock, her eyes wide with fear as she stares at her own wanted face. She stands frozen, a bead of sweat tracing a path down her cheek. The hood of her disguise does little to hide the fear in her eyes as the reality of her situation becomes public. Beside her, the young man and the schoolgirl are wide-eyed with shock, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with dreadful clarity. The soldiers' voices echo through the street. announcing a huge reward for any information on Princess Arias. The young man stares at the wanted poster on the ground, his mind reeling from the revelation. He finally understands. The girl they are protecting, Arias, is royalty. His shock gives way to a steely resolve. Their mission is clear. They must protect the princess at all costs. The leader of their merchant caravan, the man with the facial markings, quickly takes charge. He turns to the young man, addressing him as Lord Kazuma, and instructs him that they must exit through the back door immediately. He watches as the leader rallies the others, his voice urgent. Everyone hurry. The hooded figures respond in unison, moving as one. The group files through the back of the inn, past a busy innkeeper, and out into an alleyway. Their escape now in motion. Outside, a covered wagon and horses are waiting. Without a moment's hesitation, the disguised party begins to board, preparing for swift departure. As the last members are helped aboard, the wagon lurches forward. Lord Kazuma and the leader ensure everyone is secure as they pull away, leaving the town and the immediate danger behind them. As the group attempts to leave the city, a mounted soldier in checkered armor raises a hand, halting their progress. He calls out, noting the large size of their caravan and demanding to know their destination. The merchant leader, his face shadowed by a deep hood, calmly replies from atop his own horse. He states that they have finished their business in this town and are now returning to their homeland of Oldana. The soldier repeats the name, Oldana, with a hint of suspicion. Unfazed, the merchant leader confirms it and identifies his group as being from the barn trading company. Recognizing the name, the soldier's tone softens. He acknowledges them as the famous trading company and asks how their business went. The merchant leader explains that, thanks to local patronage, they procured a large quantity of Gajil textiles. To illustrate his point, another member of the caravan unrolls a bolt of finely patterned fabric, offering it as a potential gift. The soldier looks down at the offered textile, his eyes widening slightly in surprise and admiration at the quality. The man with the eye patch smiles warmly, presenting the high-quality fabric. The guard, now completely disarmed, accepts the gesture, noting they must be tired from their journey and wishing them a safe trip back. From his horse, the merchant leader dips his head slightly, thanking the guard for his concern before preparing to move on. Concealed within a carriage, Kazuma, Princess Arias, and their companion exhale in unison, the immense tension of the moment finally breaking. With the inspection passed, the heavy carriage wheels begin to creak and turn, carrying the fugitives safely through the city gate. Just as the merchant's carriage is about to proceed, a guard captain's sharp voice cuts through the air, ordering them to halt. Mounted on his horse, the captain confronts the hooded merchant leader, who calmly asks if there's a problem. With a knowing smirk, the guard captain confirms their stated cargo, Gajil textiles. He holds up a sample roll as the merchant affirms his statement. The captain's suspicion becomes clear. He notes that Gajil textiles are famous for their lightness and questions why a carriage supposedly full of them would creak so heavily under the strain. He declares his intention to inspect the contents personally. His words strike a nerve. The merchant leader's eyes widen in alarm, his composure momentarily broken. Inside the carriage, hidden from view, a young man with dark hair begins to sweat, his face etched with worry as he overhears the guard's challenge. His worry turns to sheer panic. The realization crashes down upon him. Their bluff has failed. They are in serious trouble. A carriage, escorted by mounted soldiers, creaks to a halt at a checkpoint. A stern-faced guard captain raises his hand, bellowing for them to hold it right there. He addresses the driver, his tone uncompromising. The cargo looks suspicious, he declares, and his men will be inspecting it. As his soldiers surround the vehicle, one peers into the back and calls out to his captain. He reports seeing a pile of textiles just inside, but his voice trails off with uncertainty. The soldier finishes his report, adding that there seems to be something else hidden behind the fabrics. The captain's gaze sharpens as he processes this information. He turns his attention to the hooded merchant leading the caravan, demanding to know what is on top of the cargo. The merchant hesitates, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. Suddenly, the merchant's expression shifts to one of manic relief. He exclaims that he had completely forgotten about the 4 fat sheep they had purchased, laughing as if this explains everything. His outburst causes a stir inside the carriage. Hidden amongst the cargo, a young man with dark hair is startled, his eyes wide with alarm. Outside, the distinct sound of bleeding reaches the captain's ears. He looks on with skepticism as the canvas cover of the carriage begins to tear and bulge from within. The captain roars, realizing the absurdity of the claim. As the cover rips away, the young man and Princess Arias are revealed, looking up in shock at their discovery. His face contorted with fury, the captain points directly at the exposed passengers. He shouts that he's found them, confirming they're the ones he was searching for. His surprise was cut short as another swordsman, Garrett, lunged forward, his blade a blur aimed directly at the captain, initiating a sudden, violent confrontation at the gate. The single strike plunged the checkpoint into chaos. Garrett's forces clashed with the gate guards in a flurry of steel, turning the narrow passage into a desperate battlefield. With the gate guards swiftly incapacitated, Garrett rallied his men. He roared the order to break through and get out of town, his voice ringing with urgency as his subordinate acknowledged the command. As the fight concluded behind them, Princess Arias turned her attention to the young man, Kazuma. Noticing his pale face and wide, shocked eyes, she asked with concern if he was all right. He could only stammer, unable to form a coherent reply. He tried to claim he was fine, but a sudden pain lanced through his head. He clutched his hair, stumbling as he wondered what was happening to him. In the darkness of his mind, a strange, disembodied voice echoed with a calm reassurance. It told him there was no need to worry, for he was a transcendent being. Princess Arias's worried voice cut through the haze, asking again if he was all right. But Kazuma was lost. His focus turned inward as he questioned the origin of the voice he was hearing. The voice continued, showing him a vision of himself kneeling in defeat. It spoke of a destiny he did not yet understand, promising that he would eventually return to the speaker. Her concern escalating to alarm, Princess Arias shouted his name, her voice sharp and desperate as she tried to break through his daze. The princess's cry finally reached him. Startled, he looked at her and insisted that he was fine, though his wide, unfocused eyes suggested otherwise. He snaps back to reality, the strange vision still echoing in his mind. Beside him, Garrett shouts that they will break through the gate and orders Kazuma to take care of Her Highness. Stunned but resolute, Kazuma confirms he understands. With the order given, Garrett spurs his horse forward. The gate guards command them to stop, one raising his weapon to halt the carriage, but it is too late. Garrett charges directly at their line, determined not to let them stop the escape. He crashes through the guards' formation, scattering them with the force of his charge. The carriage follows immediately after, bursting through the now unprotected gate and into the open lands beyond the city walls. From the carriage, Garrett yells that they've made it through, but warns Princess Arias to watch out, as pursuers are right behind them. He urges her to get back inside to safety. The pursuing guards give chase on horseback, shouting that their targets will not escape. As they ride alongside the speeding carriage, Garrett turns to Kazuma, offering a sincere apology for involving him in a dangerous affair. He urgently tells Garrett to focus on protecting the princess, warning with grim certainty that if a man named Bergen takes control, the entire country is finished. Princess Arias overhears and agrees, declaring that they must protect Her Highness at all costs, for she is their last hope. Kazuma listens, realizing the immense sacrifice this path will demand from everyone. Garrett looks back at Kazuma, a confident grin spreading across his face. He calls out to Lord Kazuma, telling him that he is counting on him. With that final declaration of trust, he wheels his horse around and charges headlong into the pursuing guards, cutting them down in a swift, brutal assault. A wave of doubt washed over Kazuma. He knew what he had to do, but the weight of it felt crushing. He glanced back at the princess, the grim reality setting in. Failure meant death for them all. He had to succeed. Yet, a strange, distant voice echoed in his mind, telling him not to worry, that as a transcendent being, he would eventually return to her. Meanwhile, Garrett wheeled his horse around to face the pursuing soldiers, his sword held high. He roared his conviction. The princess must be protected, no matter the cost. The chaos of the moment triggered a violent, fragmented memory in Kazuma's mind. He saw a younger version of himself, desperately shoving a girl away from the path of a speeding truck. The silhouette of his past self lunged forward, a single, desperate thought consuming him. He had to save them, this time for sure. The memory faded, leaving Kazuma's eyes wide with a stark, unwavering resolve. He would not fail, no matter what. He remembered the feeling vividly, a sensation of powerlessness and regret he couldn't place, but knew he never wanted to experience again. This newfound determination colored his memory of Garrett's final command. In that moment, Kazuma had roared back with authority, ordering everyone to leave the rear to him and defend the sides. His command was heeded. As the carriage surged forward, Garrett's voice rang out, commanding the remaining guards to follow Lord Kazuma's instructions without question. Inside the speeding carriage, Kazuma had an epiphany. Fear of falling would paralyze him. With a determined look, he secured a rope around his ankle, anchoring himself to the vehicle. He now understood what he needed to do. He grips the rope tightly, deciding he might as well commit to his desperate plan. With a grunt of effort, he then launches himself from the roof of the speeding carriage. He soars through the air, sword drawn, reasoning that this way, even if the pursuers take out the horse, he'll just be dragged along rather than left behind. His sudden aerial assault catches the lead guard completely by surprise. The young warrior crashes directly into the enemy formation, using his momentum to weave between the startled soldiers and their mounts, throwing their pursuit into chaos. He presses the attack, his blade flashing towards a guard who can only stare in disbelief, unable to react to the unorthodox assault. The guard captain, witnessing the disruption, expresses his astonishment at such an incredible and unprecedented fighting tactic. His shock quickly turns to fury as he bellows an order to his men. "Archers, shoot them down." At his command, one of the mounted soldiers immediately draws his bow, knocking an arrow and pulling the string taut. A volley of arrows flies past Kazuma. He flinches, realizing the grave danger of being tethered to the carriage, an exposed and predictable target. His eyes widen in panic as he sees the arrows are not just aimed at him. He screams a desperate warning, crying out for the carriage. Inside, the attack has found its mark. Princess Arias sees that her companion, manhwa, has been hit in the leg. Rushing to her side, Arias is relieved to see it's only a graze and tries to reassure her. She then places a hand over the wound as a soft light begins to glow from her palm. As Kazuma watches from the roof above, Princess Arias declares with conviction, "I'll heal it." His eyes widen in shock. The sight of magic solidifies the truth in his mind. This is, without a doubt, another world. He swallows hard, the gravity of his new reality setting in. The moment of realization is cut short as an arrow whistles past his head, embedding itself in the carriage roof. He scrambles to avoid the volley, realizing this is no time for contemplation. He has to do something about the mounted archers closing in. His gaze falls upon a bundle of rope nearby. An idea forms. Deciding it's all or nothing, he launches himself off the carriage and towards one of the pursuing soldiers. With grim determination etched on his face, he grips the rope, ready to execute his daring plan. He lands perfectly on the back of the soldier's horse, turning to face the stunned pursuers. Before the rider can react, he uses the rope to violently unseat him from his saddle. Without breaking stride, he leaps from that horse to the next, delivering a powerful kick that sends another soldier tumbling. Having thrown the enemy formation into chaos, he gallops away on his newly acquired mount, drawing their attention. From the carriage, Garrett watches in utter disbelief. He marvels at Lord Kazuma's incredible horsemanship, wondering aloud where he could have possibly learned such a skill. Taking advantage of the opening, he orders his men to head for the valley, noting that with the path now clear, they can all break through at once. Kazuma, now dismounted, continues his desperate flight on foot. The pursuing riders, momentarily disrupted, find his interference merely an interesting, if annoying, delay. Their leader, a man with a confident smirk, orders his subordinates to pull back. With a glint in his eye, he declares that he will handle this lone obstacle himself. Amidst the chaos of a desert battlefield, Kazuma charges forward on his steed, cutting down enemy soldiers in their light-colored robes. One of the combatants, knocked aside by the young warrior's advance, curses him as an insolent brat. In a shocking display of brutality, the enemy leader skewers one of his own men with his polearm, swinging the impaled body like a club to strike down another of his allies. The tip of his weapon gleams. He turns his gaze towards Kazuma, a confident smirk playing on his lips as he assesses the young warrior's skill, remarking that he's not bad. Kazuma stares back, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror. He can't comprehend what he just witnessed. A commander using his own ally as a weapon. His opponent levels the polearm, his expression hardening as he focuses solely on Kazuma, identifying him as his next target. A wide, malicious grin spreads across his face. He declares his intent to teach the insolent little punk a lesson. Fueled by righteous fury, Kazuma charges, shouting that he won't be messed with. He condemns his opponent as a despicable bastard who doesn't care about his own allies, calling him disgusting. The leader watches his approach, his expression unchanged. His face is a mask of rage as he closes the distance, screaming, "You bastard," at the top of his lungs. The two warriors meet in a clash of steel. Kazuma strains to parry the powerful downward strike of the polearm, the force of the blow evident on his face. He recognizes the sheer strength of his foe. He grits his teeth, realizing with a jolt that his opponent's strength is real. He's not just all talk. The enemy leader's sadistic smile widens as he presses his advantage. He deflects another rapid thrust, marveling at his opponent's skill with the spear. The spearman laughs maniacally, pressing his attack as Kazuma barely manages to block the relentless assault. He grins, a predatory look in his eyes, and compliments the determined expression on Kazuma's face. He boasts that it takes considerable skill to deflect the spear of an A-rank like himself. The revelation sends a shock through Kazuma as their weapons lock once more. He can scarcely believe it, crying out the rank in his mind as he's forced back by the sheer power of the next blow. The realization dawns on him. No wonder his opponent is so strong. If he's the same rank as the giant Totoros, then Kazuma reasons he should be able to defeat him. But the spearman notices the flicker of hope on his face and scoffs, questioning if he truly believes he still has a chance. The antagonist's grin widens into a wild laugh. He declares that Kazuma is already finished and asks if he wants to know why. It's because he's about to use a special technique. In the distance, the gate guard captain watches from his mount. He suddenly spurs his horse, riding alongside the gate guard captain at a full gallop. Then, in a stunning display of power, the spear in his hand begins to transform, its tip glowing and fanning out into a complex, multi-bladed form. The transformed weapon is aimed directly at Kazuma, who can only stare up in wide-eyed disbelief, his mind reeling as he questions what kind of spear this could possibly be. He stared at the weapon, a black, mist-like energy swirling around its wicked blades. The spear's wielder, mounted on his white horse, noticed his opponent's focus. With a confident smirk, he asked if Kazuma could see the black smoke, which he called a fighting spirit. Kazuma's wide-eyed expression confirmed it. He then declared that it hardly mattered, as wielding the holy relic, the Azure Dragon Spear, had elevated him to a completely different level of power, a fact he deemed pointless to explain to a man who was about to die. With that, he spurred his horse forward, lunging with the spear. Kazuma could only watch in shock as the weapon, wreathed in dark energy, rushed toward him. The attacker roared the name of his technique, Black Wind Devastation. The dark mist coalesced, and Kazuma realized with horror that it was forming into serpents. One of the shadowy snakes lunged, its maw wide, but Kazuma swiftly interposed his blade, deflecting the creature's strike. The block held firm, stopping the assault. The spear wielder's eyes widened in disbelief, clearly not expecting such a defense. His surprise quickly turned to fury. "Die!" he screamed, unleashing another wave of the Black Wind Devastation. This time, the attack found its mark, slicing into Kazuma's arm and sending him tumbling from Totaro's back. He hit the ground hard, immediately grabbing his wounded left arm as pain shot through him. Gritting his teeth against the agony, he could only watch as his sword lay uselessly in the dust a few feet away. He looked up just as his opponent lunged, thrusting the Azure Dragon spear directly at his chest. A wild, triumphant laugh escaped the attacker's lips, echoing across the battlefield. He gloated, certain that his foe was finished, but his triumphant expression faltered as he realized something was amiss. With grit and defiance, Kazuma spat that he didn't care if the spear was an artifact or anything else. He had caught the spear shaft with his bare hands, declaring that if he could catch it, it was now his. The antagonist, still mounted, could only stare in disbelief at the clever maneuver, acknowledging how narrowly Kazuma had dodged the fatal blow. His grip tightened as he refused to let go. But his opponent warned him that the true terror of the Black Wind devastation was only just beginning. This, the attacker sneered, was the real horror of his technique. A sudden, chilling realization washed over Kazuma as he felt a strange sensation spread through him. It was poison. He explained that this was a poison system of his own invention, boasting that an artifact is meaningless unless the wielder can truly use it. The spear, he revealed, delivered a slow-acting poison. His final, chilling command was for Kazuma to suffer slowly until he died. A heavy, panicked thump echoed in Kazuma's ears as his heart strained against the toxin. Looking down from his horse, the man sneered that in the end, the spear was just a wasted treasure. He felt sorry, he claimed, for such a weapon to be used by a coward. He grit his teeth, his face a mask of blood, sweat, and sheer determination. Despite the poison weakening his body, his eyes burned with a defiant fire. His opponent watched in disbelief from his mount, wondering why the poison hadn't fully taken hold. In response to the unspoken question, Kazuma let out a furious roar, vowing that he would not lose. This impossible surge of power was so great that it began to lift the mounted warrior clean off his horse, still clinging to the other end of the spear. The man couldn't comprehend where such brute strength was coming from, realizing there should be a limit to it. But Kazuma was far from his limit. His opponent could only stare, aghast, as Kazuma, fueled by a furious vow that he would never forgive him, began to pivot and use the spear as a lever. With a final, guttural heave, he swung the spear in a wide, powerful arc, wrenching his foe from the saddle and sending him flying through the air. The man crashed to the ground with a sickening thud, tumbling violently across the dirt before coming to a stop, the impact knocking the wind from him. The robed antagonist stands over the fallen Kazuma, his long staff held ready. With Kazuma sprawled on the ground before him, he begins to taunt his defeated opponent. Despite the blow, Kazuma pants heavily, his face bruised and bloodied as he forces himself back onto his hands and knees, refusing to stay down. His opponent watches with a cruel smirk, calmly licking a drop of what appears to be blood from his fingertip, savoring the moment. He loudly declares that Kazuma shouldn't think he's won, revealing that the weapon was coated in an ancient insect venom. With a wicked grin, he encourages his foe to go ahead, writhe in agony, and die. But Kazuma pushes himself to his feet, leaning on his own weapon for support. He scoffs, defiantly asking if his attacker wasn't the one who was going to tame him. The antagonist's confidence falters. He turns and shouts at his mounted subordinate, ordering him to retrieve the Azure Dragon spear and warning him not to steal it. As he flees, he also calls out for someone to bring his horse. He has retreated. Kazuma watches him go, gritting his teeth in frustration. He slams his fist against a large rock, cursing his inability to give chase. As the mounted soldier gallops away, a sudden realization hits Kazuma. He clutches his chest, understanding that the poison is already spreading through his body. The venom's effects intensify. He doubles over, a violent cough racking his body as his eyes widen in pain and shock. A spray of dark, viscous liquid erupts from his mouth, splattering across the cracked, dry earth. He gasps for air, the poison's effects still evident, but a sudden, urgent thought cuts through the pain. He remembers the carriage carrying Princess Arius and the others. This realization forces him to look up, his gaze fixed on the carriage speeding away through the narrow pass. He knows that at their current pace, they're still in grave danger. The path ahead is a treacherous bottleneck. He understands the enemy's plan. If the carriages reach the wide, open road beyond, they will be easily surrounded and targeted all at once. From within the fleeing carriage, both Garrett and Princess Arius look back with alarm, their voices calling out his name in a mix of fear and concern. Their cries reach him as he struggles, planting a hand on the dusty ground to keep from collapsing. As Arius watches with wide, fearful eyes, he realizes there is only one option left. He pushes himself up, his voice ringing out with newfound resolve. He orders everyone to go on ahead, declaring that he will act as a decoy and promising to catch up later. Following his declaration, he plants his feet firmly, digging his boots into the rocky ground to brace for the coming onslaught. He holds his spear horizontally across the narrow pass, a lone figure forming an impassable barrier. As the enemy cavalry charges, Princess Arius looks on in stunned silence. His face is a mask of grim determination, the cuts and grime unable to hide the fire in his eyes. He will not yield. The entire enemy force bears down on him, a wave of steel and fury. From the carriage, Garrett can only shout his name as they pull away, leaving Kazuma to face the impossible odds alone. Aboard the fleeing carriage, Princess Arias cries out in protest. Garrett, riding alongside, urgently tells her to fall back, insisting that Lord Kazuma value their future and chose to become a decoy for them. She stammers, unable to accept the decision, but Garrett's voice cuts through her hesitation, declaring that they cannot allow Kazuma's sacrifice to be meaningless. His resolve is firm as the convoy speeds through a narrow pass. He states that their duty is to press on and safely reach the Old Dana Kingdom, where the princess's aunt was married. As the carriage rattles onward, the princess grips the frame, whispering Kazuma's name in despair. The driver frantically whips the reins, pushing the horses to their limit. Her anguish turns to disbelief as she confronts Garrett, demanding to know if he truly expects her to abandon the man who stayed behind to fight alone for their sake. He meets her gaze with grim reality, warning her of the dire consequences should she be captured. The people of Aldebaran would be subjugated, and its women enslaved. His face is etched with strain as he pleads with her to endure the terrible necessity of their flight. Tears stream down her face as she whispers Kazuma's name, the weight of the decision crushing her. Her protest dies on her lips, sorrow giving way to a pained understanding. The fragile composure shatters, and she lets out a heart-wrenching cry, screaming his name into the wind. Meanwhile, the enemy commander, observing the situation, issues a cold, decisive order to his forces. They are to forget the citizens. Inside the rattling carriage, Princess Arias is consumed by despair. She questions her own worth as royalty, lamenting her inability to protect even her closest attendants. Her thoughts are a painful echo of her own powerlessness, a feeling that frustrates her to her core. Her anguish overflows. Tears stream down her face as she grits her teeth, overwhelmed by the sheer frustration of her situation. From his horse riding alongside, Garrett's voice cuts through her sorrow. His expression is taut with strain, but his eyes are fixed forward as he assures her that he understands her pain all too well. He urges her to hold onto those feelings, declaring that they will only gain meaning once they have overcome this crisis. He and the other guards spur their horses onward, kicking up dust as they race through the rugged terrain. Turning his intense gaze back to the princess, Garrett makes a solemn vow. He tells her they will not spare their own lives in the fight for the restoration of Aldebaran. Hearing her name, Arias looks up, her face still wet with tears. He continues, his voice filled with conviction. When their nation is restored, he explains, it will become an even stronger one because it will be ruled by a highness who cares so deeply for her people. His words land with profound impact. Arias listens, the tears in her eyes reflecting a flicker of understanding as she processes his unwavering faith in her. A change begins to stir within her. Above all else, a new feeling takes root. She wipes a tear from her cheek, her expression hardening as sorrow gives way to resolve. Her grief has now fully transformed into a burning determination. Her eyes blaze with intensity as she declares her new purpose. They must reach the Old Dana Kingdom, no matter what. Garrett nods in grim agreement. They must succeed, he affirms, for the sake of Lord Kazuma, who sacrificed himself for them. A shadow of concern crosses his face as he silently wonders what fate has befallen the man they left behind. He reined in his horse, his expression one of utter shock. From the carriage, Princess Arias and her companions stared forward, equally stunned by the sight before them. Emerging from the rocky pass was a lone figure on horseback, spear in hand. Against all odds, it was Lord Kazuma. A wave of relief washed over the women. They cried out his name, overjoyed and thankful that he was safe. As Kazuma rode alongside him, Garrett demanded to know how on earth he had survived what should have been fatal injuries. The captain simply could not believe it. Kazuma, his face bearing only minor scrapes, began to explain. He admitted that at first, the ordeal was difficult, leaving him feeling dizzy and nauseous. He continued his account, stating that as he kept fighting, he gradually started to feel better, a claim that left Princess Arias and the others listening in astonishment. This impossible explanation only deepened the captain's confusion, leaving him utterly speechless. With a faint smile, Kazuma offered a simple clarification. He got used to it. Garrett, still struggling to comprehend, could only ask what he meant by that. Garrett's disbelief erupted. He shouted that what Kazuma described was impossible. In response, Kazuma flexed his arm, a strange glimmer appearing around him as he insisted it was true. At that moment, a shocking realization struck the captain. His eyes widened in dawning horror as he stared at the young man. Sensing the shift, the schoolgirl called out Kazuma's name with concern. Amidst the chaos, the carriage lurches violently, throwing Princess Arias from her seat. Her long hair billows around her as she plummets towards the ground, a desperate warning cry escaping her lips. Kazuma's head snaps up at the sound of her cry. His own injuries are forgotten as he sees her falling, his eyes widening in alarm. Without a moment's hesitation, he vaults onto a nearby horse, urging the animal into a desperate gallop to intercept her before she hits the ground. His desperate maneuver succeeds. Now safely in his arms aboard the speeding horse, Princess Arias clings to him, tears streaming down her face as she cries out that he is unbelievable. He holds her tight, a fresh, bleeding wound now visible on his cheek. His eyes are squeezed shut as a long, pained sound escapes him, the cost of his reckless heroism making itself known. Inside a jolting carriage, Kazuma sits on the floor, looking up at Princess Arias. She apologizes for her earlier emotional display, her expression now calm. Beside her, another young woman in a hood looks on with concern. Kazuma remains silent, taken aback by the apology. He quickly shakes his head, flustered, insisting that he is the one who should be sorry for causing her any worry. His words are cut short as a violent lurch throws the carriage's occupants and cargo into disarray. The princess lets out a sharp cry as they are tossed about. The driver fights to control the panicked horses. From inside, Kazuma and the princess watch with wide eyes as Garrett, the guard captain, realizes the danger and bellows in order to stop the carriage immediately. Heeding the command, the driver pulls hard on the reins, bringing the snorting horses to a skidding halt. The sudden stop sends Kazuma and the hooded girl tumbling out onto the dirt road. He quickly scrambles to his knees and peers under the vehicle, discovering that the axle is badly bent. He reports his finding to Garrett and the guard with sunglasses. The captain's expression is grim as he confirms that this is a troublesome development. A broken axle would leave them stranded and in great danger. Garrett makes a swift decision, ordering everyone to push the carriage off the road and hide it amongst a thicket of bushes for repairs. With a collective effort, they begin to move the heavy wagon. Once the carriage is concealed, Garrett lets out a breath of relief. He then turns his attention to Kazuma, addressing him formally as Lord Kazuma and requesting a private word while the others handle the repairs. Carrying his spear, Kazuma follows the captain away from the group, his expression laced with apprehension as he wonders what this is about. He followed the guard captain, Garrett, a short distance from the others. As they walked, he glanced back toward Princess Arias, who watched them with a quiet, unreadable expression. Garrett's voice suddenly cut through the silence, drawing his attention forward. Before he could speak, Garrett abruptly dropped to his knees, pressing his hands firmly to the ground in a deep, formal bow. The sudden gesture of deference left Kazuma utterly bewildered as Princess Arias looked on from afar. Still kneeling, the captain looked up, his expression severe. He stated that he must express his gratitude, formally thanking Kazuma for repelling the Imperial army. The formal display completely flustered him. Waving his hands in panicked dismissal, he insisted it was nothing as he stumbled backward, overwhelmed by the captain's intensity. As Garrett began to apologize, Kazuma, sweating with unease, pleaded for him to raise his head. From her spot, Princess Arias watched, quietly remarking that she was glad it had worked out. The captain's tone then grew somber. He confessed that he had been fully prepared to abandon Kazuma, sacrificing him in order to buy time for Her Highness to escape. He absorbed the stark confession, realizing the logic behind it. He reasoned that Sir Garrett's primary duty was to protect Princess Arias, making such a difficult choice understandable. His understanding seemed to surprise Garrett. Kazuma then insisted that there was no need for such formal speech, adding that he would do the same in the captain's position. Garrett acknowledged his words with a quiet hum. Garrett's expression shifted, a newfound respect in his eyes. He explained that his formal address was not his own choice. It was an order from Her Highness. The revelation left him momentarily confused. As he tried to process it, Princess Arias's voice reached them from across the clearing. She announced that she, too, had something to apologize for. She bows her head slightly, apologizing for having hidden her true identity from him. Kazuma, flustered, tells her it can't be helped, given that she is a princess. He thanks her for her kindness, but she quietly refutes his sentiment, suggesting it is not so simple. She stands tall and formally introduces herself as Arias Sam Alexandros, the first princess of the kingdom of Aldebaran. The grand title leaves Kazuma momentarily stunned, but he quickly introduces himself in return as Nakamichi Kazuma. Hearing his name, Arias asks if Kazuma was his family name. He clarifies that, no, Kazuma is his first name. He then corrects himself, stating that in this world, the proper order would be Kazuma Nakamichi. His specific phrasing catches the princess's attention, and Garrett looks on with sudden interest. The slip of the tongue sends a jolt of panic through him. He thinks to himself that since Arias was honest with him, perhaps he should be as well. He confirms her unspoken question, admitting that he is not from this world. The confession startles both Arias and Garrett. The princess asks if this means another world exists. She sits down, processing the information, and asks if he was transported here by someone. He affirms this, stating his belief that it was not an accident, but an intentional summoning. He adds that he can pinpoint the exact moment it happened. His mind flashes back to that moment, a time when he was shaken by witnessing death for the first time. It was then that a voice echoed in his head, telling him not to worry, for he was a transcendent being. He pondered the meaning of the word transcendent, wondering if it referred to someone who crosses between worlds. The final words he heard upon his summoning echoed in his mind. You will eventually return to me. His reverie was broken by Arias's voice, who asked what was wrong. Snapping back to the present, Kazuma apologized, explaining that he was just lost in thought. He continued, telling her that because the world he came from is so different from this one, he often finds himself thinking about many things. Arias listened, her expression one of surprise at the confirmation. The conversation shifted as they sat with Garrett. Arias, curious, asked if his world lacked features like the status screen, noting that it had surprised him. He confirmed that it had. He elaborated that at first, he didn't understand what was happening, and the constant ding-ding sound of leveling up had startled him. Arius remarked that he had been leveling up at an incredible speed. At this, Arius wondered aloud what his status looked like now. Kazuma admitted he had turned off the notifications because they were annoying and had completely forgotten about it. As he summoned the screen, both Garrett and Arius stared in utter shock. The screen glowed with impossibly high figures. His level was 885. His stats read: Attack Power 1091, Defense 589, Strength 834, Endurance 626, Dexterity 345, Agility 691, Intelligence 381, and Spirit 662. The numbers left them speechless. Garrett, sweating, could only ask how high this was. Arius, her eyes wide with disbelief, stated that the last time she had checked, his level was 259. The speed of his growth was truly unbelievable. Garrett provided context for the staggering figure. He explained that S rank is a level of existence reserved for those at level 1000 or above, a tier so rare that there might only be one such person per country. At level 885, he informed Kazuma he was already approaching S rank territory. The explanation struck Kazuma with the force of a physical blow. He was stunned, questioning how his level could possibly be so high. He couldn't comprehend having fought enough to achieve such a rank. He stared at his status screen in confusion as Princess Arius frantically pointed out that something was missing. When he asked what was wrong, she explained that his status screen completely lacked any mention of MP or magic power. He processed her words with wide-eyed shock. He had to confirm if those stats were normally present for everyone, questioning if that meant everyone could use magic. He turned to ask Arius if she had been using magic earlier, but before she could answer, Garrett clapped a hand on his shoulder, interrupting to say he had a question of his own. Her attention, however, remained on his question. She confirmed that manhwa had been using healing magic on the injured women, which is what he must have witnessed. The realization finally struck him. So that was magic. He thanked her, and Arius, noting his genuine surprise, deduced that the world he came from must not have magic. As she began to explain that his lack of magic stats was why she was so surprised, Garrett forcefully interrupted. His eyes were fixed on the spear Kazuma now held. He demanded to know where Lord Kazuma had acquired such an artifact. Kazuma, taken aback, explained that he got it during the battle from a man named Souza. The captain's expression grew grim. He brought a hand to his chin, murmuring that he had heard of that name before. He elaborated, explaining that within the powerful Imperial Army, there exists a unique unit known as the Black Snake Squad. The man leading that very unit is said to be named Souza. The name sparked a memory for Kazuma. He recalled his opponent from the battle, remembering that the man had called the weapon the Azure Dragon Spear. He looked down at the ornate spear in his hands, then back at his companions, whose faces had all turned serious. He asked what was wrong, but Arius's intense gaze was fixed solely on that Azure Dragon Spear. He held in his hands one of the Kingdom of Aldebaran's secret treasures. Princess Arius explained that it had been stolen from the royal treasury long ago, likely by the Empire. The revelation left Kazuma speechless. He processed this new information, a thought dawning on him. It finally made sense why Souza was so unfamiliar with handling the spear. He concluded that the weapon should be returned to its rightful owner. With this resolve, he hesitantly extended the spear towards the princess. She looked at him intently, calling his name. She believed it was divine guidance that their treasure had come full circle to end up in his hands, all for the purpose of protecting them. Kazuma could only look back in confusion. Princess Arius formally requested that he continue to wield the Azure Dragon Spear for their protection. Gazing at the weapon, Kazuma's resolve hardened. He accepted, swearing on the spear that he would protect them all. Garrett, the guard captain, stepped forward to address them. He pointed to a strange protrusion on the spear's shaft, asking about it. Kazuma explained that Souza had modified it to release poison when pressed. The captain's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in fury. His anger erupted. He roared at the outrageous desecration of a sacred artifact, noting with disgust that the mechanism was sloppily attached with mere adhesive. He grabbed the spear, declaring they would remove the foul addition at once. As Garrett wrestled with the spear, Kazuma noticed the princess's worried expression and asked what was wrong. She quietly replied that the poison was the least of their concerns. They needed to be careful because of what it implied. The captain paused, his face grim. He stated that according to Kazuma's own account, they had just fought Souza's Black Snake Squad. The unspoken conclusion hung heavy in the air. The ones pursuing them were an elite Imperial unit. His face contorted with dread as the name of their pursuers solidified in his mind. He uttered it with a mix of disbelief and terror, the Grinwald Division. They were known throughout the lands as the Empire's strongest. Princess Arius explains that the Black Corps they just fought is the strongest military force in the Empire. The guard captain, Garrett, grits his teeth, identifying their formidable leader as Grinwald. Hearing this, Kazuma looks shocked, questioning if their enemy is truly that powerful. He elaborates that even with their country's full might, victory against Grinwald's forces would be impossible. As Garrett clenches his jaw in frustration, Arius recalls being told about a particular artifact. She turns to Kazuma, asking if he has heard of the Alphaburn. She explains that it is a divine treasure, passed down through her family for generations. Kazuma is taken aback, questioning if such a thing, a god treasure, truly exists. Arius then recounts the harrowing events of the previous dawn. The enemy had suddenly materialized at their border, launching an immediate, overwhelming assault that shattered their defenses in a single, decisive blow. Concerned, Kazuma asks about her father, the king. With a pained expression, Arias reveals that the king acted as a decoy to ensure her escape. The gravity of the situation dawns on Kazuma as he realizes her brother must also be in peril. He asks if the king was captured. Arias confirms it, but adds that her father's younger brother is still fighting somewhere. She clings to the hope that he is still alive. Kazuma offers a faint, reassuring smile. His attention then shifts as he sees that Arias has other support. Garrett looks on with surprise. In a nearby clearing, the princess is being tended to by her maid, who asks where they are. Arias, looking faint, admits she does not know. Suddenly, she cries out, pleading for something to stop as a traumatic memory surfaces. Kazuma rushes to her side, asking if she is all right. Her eyes wide with fear, she asks him if he is certain that Souza will come for them. Her mind flashes back to a dark throne room, where a line of people kneel. She remembers a figure approaching her, removing her mask. The face of the man is cast in shadow as she recalls her brother's voice calling out to her. Back in the present, Kazuma asks who it was she saw behind the mask. The memory of the man's confident smile lingers in her mind. Just then, Garrett interrupts, asking what they are discussing. The abrupt question startles Arias and her maid. He stood there, sweating, realizing that what just happened was a flashback. Princess Arias, seeing his state, suggested he try using magic. The maid looked on, surprised. The princess explained that she felt calmer now, as if she had been saved. She noted that while her MP was depleted, her status screen showed no record of magic use, leading her to believe she had never used it before. She urged him to try. In response, Garrett loudly protested, reminding them that Kazuma was still a novice. Kazuma seemed to accept this point. However, Arias confidently told Garrett to leave it to her, asserting that she was more proficient than the captain. Garrett remained unconvinced, beginning to argue that even if they were rescued, the Vanguard assault unit was also in peril. Ignoring him, Arias turned to Kazuma and asked how they should proceed. She then instructed him to close his eyes and try to light a fire within his heart, a suggestion that left him momentarily confused. He took her words literally. Pulling out a small box, he struck a match and lit a nearby candle. With the flame flickering before him, he clenched his fist, a look of determination on his face. Arias quickly clarified that this wasn't what she meant. She tried to explain it as a feeling like the warmth of drinking hot water and suggested he try to ignite a fire in his hand. He stared intently, his mind focused solely on the concept of fire. His concentration was broken when Garrett suddenly grabbed his shoulder. Startled, he asked what was happening. Arias pointed towards him, and Garrett exclaimed in disbelief, remarking on how incredible his status screen looked. With a wide, excited smile, Arias explained the anomaly. At his age and with his current status, it should be impossible for him to use so many different skills or even level up. Garrett, intrigued, urged him to wait, wanting to see the required experience values for himself. Garrett leaned in, pointing directly at the glowing status screen hovering before Kazuma. His finger traced the line item for required experience, drawing Kazuma's wide-eyed attention to the numbers displayed. He explained that the required experience to level up was the only value listed. All of his skills, Garrett continued, were consolidated into a single total. The implication slowly dawned on Kazuma. The full weight of the discovery hit Garrett. He understood that this meant the required experience would increase to a near-infinite amount. As the others reacted, Kazuma stared at his own hand, questioning why he possessed such a strange and demanding power. He stood silently as Princess Arias expressed her surprise, realizing he was a lost one. The thought echoed in his own mind, why was he in this world? Yet, he quickly dismissed the idea, feeling it wasn't the complete truth. A small smile formed on his face as a realization settled in. This wasn't something that had happened to him. It was his own choice. Now, he and his companions were together, facing this new reality. Princess Arias laughed softly, telling him not to worry about it, even if she didn't quite understand everything. She looked at him with sincere gratitude, acknowledging that she wouldn't be alive if it weren't for him. The maid concurred, adding that without him, the princess would have been captured. Princess Arias affirmed this, then laid out their plan. They were heading for the Aldana Kingdom, a nation at odds with the Aldebaran Kingdom. She assured Kazuma that if they could reach Aldana, her mother would undoubtedly provide them with aid. Garrett, however, pointed out a critical flaw in their plan. They lacked the funds for such a journey. As he spoke, Kazuma's head snapped up. He heard the distinct sound of hooves. His eyes widened in alarm as he realized a large cavalry unit, even larger than the previous one, was closing in on them. A sudden, jarring sound cuts through the forest air. Kazuma's eyes widen in alarm. He knows this sound is wrong. As the others react with confusion, Garrett, the guard captain, bellows an urgent command to camouflage the carriage at once. Reacting instantly, he grabs Princess Arias by the hand, pulling her away from the carriage. He realizes that escaping from their current position is impossible. They have gone too far and are completely exposed. From the cover of the dense foliage, an unseen enemy scout confirms the situation. The target is separated. Below, a massive army of soldiers in light-colored robes emerges from the trees, far outnumbering the princess's small retinue. The sight of this overwhelming force confirms Kazuma's fears. Sweat beads on his face as he realizes they cannot continue down this road. Ahead, mounted soldiers led by the hostile gate captain block their path, the horses growing restless from the tension. His captain, Garrett, points towards a gap in the enemy line, explaining that if they can just break through that one point, they can escape. But as Kazuma's gaze follows, it lands on the carriage wheel, and a terrible realization dawns on him. Before they can act, the enemy cavalry charges forward, alerted to their position. Kazuma watches them approach, knowing his earlier shout had given them away. Leading the charge, the gate captain wonders what caused the commotion and orders his men to converge on the location. Hidden nearby, Kazuma grits his teeth in anger, understanding that if all the enemy forces are drawn to this spot, his entire party will be captured. As he crouches, ready to act, Princess Arya speaks to him with a calm intensity. She reminds him that he is a transcendent being. Even if he is cornered, she explains, his enemies are no match for him, and he will eventually have to face them. Her words seem to ignite something within him. Clutching his chest, Kazuma feels a surge of resolve, believing he can do it. Just as he is about to move, Garrett grabs him from behind, pulling him back and telling him to get away from the road. He holds a young man back firmly, warning him not to be reckless. But Kazuma is resolute. He tells Garrett that he will handle this alone, pointing back towards their allies. He says the carriage is there and urges them to escape while they can. He shoves the captain's restraining arm aside, breaking free with a surge of determination. Ignoring the pleas of his comrades, Kazuma plants his feet and prepares to charge into the fray alone. The warrior launches himself forward, a blur of motion against the forest backdrop. He leaves his stunned captain behind, a silent exclamation of disbelief on Garrett's face as Kazuma closes the distance to the enemy line. His charge is fueled by a single thought, Princess Arias. He recalls her words, her faith in him, and grips his polearm tighter. He will protect her, no matter the cost. With a powerful swing, he prepares to meet the enemy head-on. He lands directly before the enemy commander, Souza, who looks on with a mixture of surprise and amusement. Souza addresses him casually, remarking on the fact that he is still alive. He demands to know how Souza survived their previous encounter. With a wild grin, Souza dismisses the question, claiming he was merely sent flying. His true objective, he declares while pointing, is Princess Arias. From the carriage, both the princess and Garrett watch the scene unfold with growing dread. The enemy leader lunges, explaining that he returned to this very battlefield just for Kazuma. This time, he vows Kazuma will become his prey. Kazuma braces himself, spear at the ready to parry the attack. Their confrontation is abruptly halted by the thunder of hoofs. A formidable force of armored cavalry sweeps onto the field, interrupting the duel. Souza looks on with irritation as Kazuma turns his attention to the unexpected arrivals. From the ranks of the cavalry emerges a towering figure clad in imposing black plate armor. This new commander stands with an air of absolute authority, dwarfing the soldiers around him. He addresses Souza directly, dismissing him as a small fry. Souza seethes at the insult, shouting that his earlier performance was merely a moment of carelessness. The armored commander calmly retorts that while Souza is indeed an A-rank powerhouse, it was only achieved by using a black phoenix plume. Kazuma listens intently, absorbing this critical piece of intelligence. The armored figure introduces himself as Grinwald. He then turns his gaze to Kazuma, identifying him as the source of the commotion. Before Kazuma can respond, Souza erupts in fury, screaming at Grinwald for his insolence and for interfering. He stared in disbelief as the armored commander, Grinwald, addressed him directly. Grinwald identified him as the princess's subordinate and noted his battle with Belgon. The implication struck Kazuma with force, a level of 100 or higher. He questioned what Grinwald meant, his mind racing. He had been leveling up inside the labyrinth, but the experience required just to reach level 1 was immense. As Kazuma grappled with this revelation, Souza interjected, questioning if Grinwald was serious. He declared vehemently that he would be the one to claim the Demon King's head. Grinwald curtly silenced him, telling him not to speak out of turn. Ignoring Souza's outburst, the armored commander turned his full attention back to Kazuma, declaring that he would be his opponent. The statement left Kazuma stunned, while Souza's fury grew at being so thoroughly dismissed. His rage boiling over, Souza lunged forward, screaming at Grinwald for turning his back on him. Kazuma could only curse under his breath as the situation devolved. Yet, Grinwald stood his ground, unmoving, as a menacing, dark energy began to swirl around his armored form. The dark energy intensified around him. Grinwald calmly stated that his first priority was to stop Souza's blade. He mused aloud that doing so would certainly complicate matters further. Sweat beads on Kazuma's brow as he faces the imposing armored figure. He realizes he has been fighting too defensively, merely waiting for an opening. He resolves that he must be the one to attack first. He lunges forward with his sword, a blur of motion. The armored commander, Grinwald, is taken aback by the sudden burst of aggression, his mind registering only the incredible speed of the advance. Their blades meet with a deafening crash. The force of the impact is immense, far greater than anything Kazuma has ever experienced. He is stunned, unable to comprehend how he could be so thoroughly repelled. The sheer power behind the blow sends him skidding backward, his boots digging into the ground. He grits his teeth, every muscle straining to withstand the overwhelming pressure from Grinwald's weapon. As he struggles, Grinwald presses his advantage, expressing surprise that Kazuma was able to block his sword at all. Kazuma's eyes widen, still reeling from the raw strength of his opponent. He manages to break away, now holding a spear. He thinks to himself that while he somehow deflected the initial assault, he might be overwhelmed if it happens again. He grips the new weapon, preparing for the next exchange. Grinwald stands over him, an aura of immense power radiating from his armored form. Kazuma understands the truth of the situation. His opponent is level 100 or higher, a warrior of S-rank strength. The gap between them is vast. The armored commander mockingly asks if the fight is already over. His massive blade descends again, and Kazuma can only stare in shock as the battlefield erupts around him. He parries desperately. Grinwald compliments his good movements, then declares that he will enjoy this fight before lunging forward once more, his attack filled with a cruel and playful energy. The assault continues relentlessly. Grinwald demands to know who Kazuma is, questioning if he is some kind of spy from the Army's intelligence division. He roars for Kazuma to be defeated quickly, pressing his attack with overwhelming force. He stares up at the armored commander, whose eyes narrow with intrigue from within his helmet. Grinwald remarks on Kazuma's determination to protect the princess, a sentiment that seems to pique his interest. A wave of dread washes over Kazuma. He realizes this is a dangerous development. In response, Grinwald challenges him to demonstrate that fighting spirit. The massive blade descends, and though Kazuma parries, the sheer force of the blow sends him skidding backward across the ground. He digs his heels in, his body now enveloped in a swirling aura of pure fighting spirit. Grinwald watches this display of power, his posture unchanging. The commander notes that this magical fighting spirit is unlike anything he has seen before, even from someone named Kaiser, but he remains unimpressed. Their gazes lock in a silent challenge. He decides to show respect for his opponent's audacity. This, he declares while gesturing with his massive sword, is his own form of justice. With that declaration, Grinwald unleashes a torrent of dark, fiery energy that engulfs the area. The intense heat sears Kazuma as he is caught within a maelstrom. He watches as the flames seem to merge with Kazuma's own aura, noting that his fighting spirit has taken on an intense heat. Seeing this, Grinwald decides the time is right to reveal his ultimate technique. He swings his greatsword, generating multiple spinning vortexes of raw power that tear through the air toward his opponent. The technique is unleashed, the tyrant dragon's flame frenzy. The fiery tempest slams into Kazuma with devastating force, lifting him off his feet and tossing him helplessly through the air. He is utterly overwhelmed by the sheer power of the assault. He is consumed by the inferno, the heat so intense it sizzles. From a distance, Arius watches in terror, realizing the sheer intensity of the flames is suffocating him, stealing the very air from his lungs. He collapses to the ground, the flames swirling around him. A single thought cuts through the pain. Is he truly going to burn to death here, in this agonizing heat? His body goes limp, falling face first onto the scorched ground. Arius's eyes widen in disbelief. She remembers the promise they made. He can't die now, not yet. But as he lies unmoving, a strange, glowing interface materializes above his body. A message displays, clearly in the air. Level up. Amidst a haze of memories and ethereal figures, Kazuma's resolve hardens. He thinks to himself that it's not time to die yet. He has a reason to live. His focus narrows to Princess Arius as he reaffirms his vow to protect her, just as he promised. In that moment of sheer will, a systemic notification confirms a change. His level has increased. On the battlefield, a colossal wave of fire erupts, startling the armored commander Grinwald and his steed. He recognizes the overwhelming power instantly, identifying it as the general's ultimate technique. As the flames die down, he stands with his soldiers, remarking on the incredible fighting spirit and heat of the S-rank technique. He laments, however, that such a powerful skill was wasted on his opponent. He thought the confrontation would be more enjoyable, but seems to have ended prematurely. His thoughts are cut short as a figure emerges from the smoldering aftermath, causing him and his men to react with surprise. Before the commander can process what he's seeing, Kazuma explodes into action, weaving through the soldiers and cutting them down with impossible speed. Grinwald can only watch, stunned. The young warrior stands his ground, weapon at the ready, surrounded by the dispatched guards. His eyes burn with an unwavering focus. Through the slit of his helmet, Grinwald's eye widens in utter disbelief. He stares at Kazuma, whose dirt-streaked face shows nothing but grim determination. The commander confronts him, stating the impossibility of what he's witnessed. He questions how Kazuma could have endured the rampaging dragon flame, asking if this means his level is now equivalent to S-rank. He watches his opponent, his face bruised, but his eyes filled with resolve as a blur of motion signals the start of the engagement. The sudden charge catches the armored commander by surprise, who can only utter a startled exclamation as Kazuma closes the distance with his polearm level. His polearm meets the commander's massive blade, and the wooden shaft instantly splinters under the immense pressure of the block. He is driven back, teeth gritted and muscles straining, struggling to hold his ground against the overwhelming physical strength of his foe. The momentum sends him skidding backward across the ground. From his vantage point among the troops, the commander, Grinwald, notes that he is being pushed back, yet finds his opponent's tenacity interesting. The commander roars and unleashes a flurry of powerful strikes. Kazuma deflects the blows, but the relentless assault makes him realize that a direct confrontation is useless. He parries the blows, knowing the attacks won't break his defense. More importantly, he understands he must act quickly to reach Princess Arias and Garrett. His gaze sharpens as he declares that he can now see the path to victory. He tells Grinwald that a warrior like him should understand what that means, as the commander prepares another devastating overhead swing. The commander pauses his attack, acknowledging that the outcome has not yet been decided. Across the clearing, Kazuma leans on his polearm, catching his breath. He declares that next, he will show his full power. Kazuma watches grimly as, from the sidelines, one of the mounted soldiers remarks to the princess that the difference in their abilities is even greater than before. He braced himself as Grinwald, cloaked in a dark, fiery aura, lunged forward with a powerful shout. The armored commander swung his massive blade, unleashing a wave of destructive energy that engulfed the battlefield. The force of the blow struck Kazuma's spear directly. Grinwald, observing the impact, noted with satisfaction that his opponent had taken the hit head-on. A colossal explosion of dark energy erupted from the point of contact, tearing across the landscape. Grinwald stood back, observing the aftermath, believing the fight to be settled. But as the swirling vortex of darkness began to part, an unexpected sight caused Grinwald and his soldiers to stare in disbelief. In the center of the devastation, Kazuma stood firm, the residual energy swirling around him like harmless flames. He looked down at himself, seemingly as surprised as his opponent to have survived the blast unscathed. He planted his feet, his stance unwavering despite the incredible power he had just endured. Looking up, his gaze fixed on the armored commander, he declared that he had to go and help Arias. His expression hardened with resolve. He stated that if Grinwald intended to stand in his way and interfere, then he would simply have to defeat him. With a surge of newfound strength, he drove his spear forward, effortlessly stopping the commander's massive blade. The armored commander recoiled slightly, caught off guard by the sudden and impossible display of power from the young warrior. He coughed, a spray of dark blood erupting from beneath his helmet. The source of the injury was clear. Kazuma's spear had pierced straight through his armored midsection, the force of the blow staggering him backward. His grip loosened, and his massive greatsword fell from his hand, embedding its tip into the dusty ground. The armored commander stood motionless for a moment, stunned. Finally, his strength gave out, and he collapsed to one knee, using the fallen sword for support. In the distance, one of his mounted soldiers cried out his name in alarm. "Your Excellency, Kaiser!" Kazuma watched his defeated foe, his own face streaked with grime and blood, his expression grim and resolute. He shifted his grip on the long spear, preparing for what might come next. He then turned to leave, but a sharp command cut through the air, ordering him to wait. A line of heavily armored soldiers had appeared, blocking his path. He stopped, looking back over his shoulder at the soldiers. He wondered aloud if they truly intended to let him leave in silence. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his voice sharp with disbelief. He questioned how Kazuma could possibly think he could win against them when even Kaiser had been defeated, then stated with absolute certainty that Kazuma could not emerge victorious. He continued, shouting that they would not fight with such a handicap, implying that Kazuma's victory over their commander was somehow unfair. The soldiers stood ready, their blades pointed towards him. Kazuma faced them, his posture calm. He acknowledged their position, simply stating that he understood and would be their opponent. He stood his ground, bruised but defiant, and silently challenged the soldiers to come at him. Meanwhile, deep within a dense forest, Garrett's group fled, their footsteps rustling through the undergrowth. As they ran, Manhwa called out from behind Garrett, pleading with him to wait for a moment. Her plea brought him to a sudden halt. Distraught, she demanded to know how they could simply leave Kazuma behind. Garrett clenched his fist, his expression pained but resolute. He declared that this sacrifice was necessary for the rebuilding of the kingdom. He turned to face Manhwa, his gaze intense, reminding her that her sole duty now was to survive and reach Lord Orga. Everything else was secondary. Garrett tried to explain that this was Kazuma's decision as well, but his words caught in his throat as the entire group stopped dead in their tracks. Their path was blocked. Souza stood before them, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He remarked how much he enjoyed the desperate expression of a cornered rat, as Garrett and Manhwa stared in shock. He rested his weapon on his shoulder, his eyes gleaming with predatory delight. "You all," he announced, "are my favorite kind of prey." Deep within the dense foliage, Souza watches his prey, a smirk playing on his lips. He observes Garrett and Manhwa, remarking on the desperate expressions of cornered rats. The voice is familiar to Garrett. His eyes narrow, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple as he recognizes the sound. The source of the voice steps out from the undergrowth, flanked by two masked soldiers. It is Souza, captain of the Black Snake unit. He announces that there is no escape for them, reminding them that he is the one who fought Kazuma. In response to the threat, Garrett's hand goes to the hilt of his sword. Recognizing the man who fought on par with Kazuma, he resolves that he will be the one to face him here. But he is not alone. The rest of his unit, including the guard with the eye patch and the one with spiky hair, suddenly arrives. The eye patch wearing guard declares that he will remain, surprising his captain. The guard with the eye patch takes command of the small group, telling the others to press on ahead while they hold the line. Garrett, Understanding the sacrifice, grimly accepts, noting they are short on time. Manhwa, however, cries out for them to wait, demanding to know what they are planning. He turns to the young noblewoman, addressing her as Your Highness. With a calm smile, he tells her that his duty of accompanying her ends here. His words of farewell are met with her tearful, desperate refusal. She insists that she will not go, that they must all escape together. Her plea is met not with agreement, but with a solemn vow from the guards. They implore her to rebuild the kingdom, declaring that it is their greatest wish to become the foundation upon which she succeeds. Their pledge sends a wave of anguish through Manhwa. She cries out in protest as Garrett holds her back, his own expression grim as he forces them to retreat, leaving his men to their fate. Meanwhile, the guards who remained behind stood their ground. Souza faced them, a smirk playing on his lips as he acknowledged their grim determination. He mused that they were prepared to die, and he was more than willing to oblige. He lunged forward, his polearm a blur, striking at the two guards simultaneously. They raised their swords to block, but the force of the blow was immense. Far from the sounds of battle, Garrett pushed onward through the dense undergrowth, carrying Manhwa as he fled. He didn't know how long they had been running, only that they had to keep moving. He pressed on, sweat dripping down his face, having followed the beast trail single-mindedly. A sudden realization struck him. If they continued straight, they would be caught. He knew they had to deviate from the path soon, but his realization came too late. The path abruptly ended at the edge of a vast, impassable rock wall. They were trapped. His heart sank. He frantically scanned the area, his mind racing. Left or right? Which way should they go? Before he could decide, a voice from above made a suggestion. Souza reasoned that heading left towards Altana was the obvious choice, so their enemy would likely think the same. Therefore, he concluded they should go right, taking the opposite path. With that, he dropped down, landing gracefully before them. He stood before them, flanked by his masked black snake unit. With a chilling smile, he greeted them, stating that he'd finally found his prey. In response, Garrett planted himself firmly between the enemy and the three women he was protecting, Manhwa, Princess Arias, and her maid. His expression was a mask of grim determination. His eyes locked onto Garrett. He calmly asked if he was the guard captain. Garrett, sweat trickling down his temple, could only stare back as he contemplated the implications of the question. Souza's lips curled into a wide, cruel smile. He mockingly praised Garrett's fallen men, telling him to pass on a message that they had done a good job and provided him with ample entertainment. His words struck a nerve. Garrett's face contorted with rage, his teeth grinding together. Souza watched the reaction with amusement, coolly asking why he was getting so upset. He then offered a twisted explanation, claiming he had to kill some shitty brat to take his place, and sarcastically asked for forgiveness for the necessity. The implication of his words horrified Princess Arias. She cried out, demanding to know what had become of Kazuma. He turned away from her, feigning ignorance. He claimed not to know Kazuma's fate, only that he had been taken by the Kaiser's men after foolishly challenging an S-rank opponent. A cold sweat broke out on the princess's face as she absorbed the terrible news. Souza's voice continued, a venomous whisper suggesting that by now, Kazuma was likely nothing more than a charred corpse. His attention then shifted fully to the princess, whom he identified as royalty from Aldebaran. He declared his intention to take her back alive, viewing her as a mere stepping stone for his own rise to power. In response, Garrett planted himself firmly between the aggressor and the royals, his sword held ready. He roared his defiance, swearing he would never surrender the princess to such a man. Souza merely threw his head back and laughed. His laughter subsided as he mockingly framed the scene with his fingers, noting aloud that Garrett was the one who had sworn to protect the princess. Behind the guard captain, Manhwa and the maid tried to comfort the trembling royal. Souza's gaze narrowed, his eye filling the view. He made the same framing gesture toward Garrett, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone as he informed the captain, "You're not the only one." He stands his ground, sword held ready, his expression a mask of grim determination. He declares that he alone is more than enough to face this threat. With his blade leveled at Souza, he vows to personally deal with him. Souza and his masked soldiers watch, unconcerned by the captain's challenge. Souza merely smirks, dismissing the threat. He mockingly offers to test the old man's skills before launching himself forward, his staff a blur of motion. Their weapons clash with a sharp ring of steel. With a wild cry of excitement, Souza orders his men to stay out of it. Garrett grunts with effort, parrying the furious assault. The duel erupts into a chaotic exchange of blows. Garrett is pushed onto the defensive, his sword meeting Souza's staff again and again. From a distance, Princess Arias and her companions watch the desperate struggle. The sheer weight and speed of Souza's attacks are staggering. Garrett realizes the monstrous power he's facing, wondering how Kazuma ever defeated such a foe. Princess Arias cries out his name in terror as Souza presses his advantage with a confident grin. Seeing the tide of battle turning, Manhwa urgently tells Princess Arias that they must flee. She gestures for them to escape while Garrett keeps the enemy occupied. The princess, however, refuses to run. She turns to Manhwa, her expression resolute, and declares that they will stay and use their support magic to aid the captain. As the masked soldiers begin to advance on them, Princess Arias states her belief that they can hold them off, at least for a short while. Manhwa looks on, overwhelmed, thinking their situation is hopeless. Souza, still effortlessly parrying Garrett's strikes, scoffs at their plan. He taunts them, stating that at their level, their magic won't work on a man like him. Ignoring his taunts, manhwa reasons that if she and the princess combine their chants, their magic should be effective. She then instructs the maid to take her highness and escape. Taking her companion's lead, Princess Arius joins manhwa. They close their eyes in unison, hands clasped, and begin their incantation, calling forth an unseen darkness as magical energy crackles between them. Their voices rise, pleading for power, for a pitch-black night to be granted unto them. A swirling vortex of dark energy, etched with glowing runes, erupts around the dueling Garrett and Souza. As the spell, blind, takes hold, Souza's eyes widen in momentary surprise. The effect is immediate. The masked soldiers cry out in confusion, suddenly unable to see. manhwa seizes the opportunity, shouting for Garrett's attention while urging the princess to run. With his eyes squeezed shut, Souza appears to be caught within the spell's grasp. manhwa shouts that they've stolen the enemy's sight, creating an opening to attack him now. Garrett's expression hardens with resolve. He praises their effort and lunges forward, sword held high for a decisive overhead strike. This is his chance. The blade never connects. With impossible speed, Souza blocks the sword with his staff and, in the same fluid motion, thrusts the other end forward, impaling Garrett through the abdomen. The captain grunts, his face a mask of shock and pain. He stumbles back, clutching the grievous wound. Souza simply smirks, remarking that a double-layered chant is meaningless against such a vast difference in their levels of power. His strength fails him. Garrett's fingers go limp, and his sword clatters onto the stone ground. manhwa and the maid watch, their faces frozen in utter disbelief. His body gives out. Garrett collapses to his knees in a pool of his own blood as Souza stands over him, victorious. From afar, Princess Arius covers her mouth in horror, whispering his name in despair. She and manhwa could only stare in shock as Garrett lay defeated on the ground, blood trickling from his lips. Their attacker, Souza, turned his cold gaze upon them, identifying the women as the ones who initiated the confrontation. He spun his staff in a wide arc, effortlessly deflecting a volley of dark projectiles. As the energy dissipated, he roared that they had meddled for no reason. Tears streamed down the princess's face, but her eyes burned with defiance. Clutching a small dagger, she screamed for him to stop. Her plea was met with contempt. Souza seized her, ignoring her desperate cry that he should only be after her. He silenced her with a sharp command to be quiet. Seeing this, manhwa lunged forward, her own staff raised high. With a desperate cry, she moved to intercept the blow meant for the princess. The attack was stopped cold. Souza's staff met manhwa's, the impact creating a flash of light. He looked down, a flicker of surprise crossing his face at her intervention. But it was not Souza who blocked the blow. A new figure stood between them, Kazuma. He had caught Souza's staff with his own spear, his expression grim. The princess and manhwa stared in utter shock, questioning his sudden appearance. Standing amidst the debris, a bruised and battered Kazuma holds his spear, offering a weary smile. He apologizes to manhwa for the wait, assuring her that everything is all right now. She looks on, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. He then charges forward, spear held ready, running directly towards Souza and his soldiers. manhwa cries out his name in alarm. Souza's face contorts with rage and astonishment upon seeing the newcomer. He screams, demanding to know why Kazuma is there. In the background, manhwa watches with a worried expression. Kazuma calmly announces that he has defeated the general. The declaration stops Souza in his tracks, who whirls around from his fight with Kaiser, shouting in disbelief. His soldiers are equally stunned. manhwa is struck by the revelation. She realizes that Kaiser must be the name of the enemy general, and the thought that Kazuma defeated such a figure leaves her breathless with amazement. He looks Souza directly in the eyes, telling him to stop lying. Souza can only grit his teeth, his expression a storm of anger and disbelief. Souza's mind races. He thinks it must be a lie, that it has to be. After all, the general is S-rank. Kazuma counters this unspoken doubt, declaring that his very presence is proof of his victory. Behind him, the defeated masked soldiers litter the ground. Souza screams that it's all over, but manhwa's voice cuts through, thanking Kazuma for coming for her. Overcome with relief, she rushes into his arms, embracing him tightly. With tears streaming down her face, she tells him how truly glad she is that he's alive. He holds her close, his own expression softening with relief and exhaustion. He quietly apologizes for being late. He and manhwa share a moment of quiet relief. Her expression softens, a gentle smile gracing her lips as she looks at him, safe at last. This reunion did not go unnoticed. Souza, flanked by his masked soldiers, observed them from a distance before taking a deliberate step forward. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. He struggled to comprehend the situation, internally questioning if this boy had truly defeated the monstrous Kaiser. His disbelief morphed into wide-eyed shock as Kazuma turned to face him directly. Kazuma's voice cut through the tension, asking if Souza was perhaps considering an escape. Enraged by the suggestion, Souza bellowed, questioning what Kazuma was even saying. He declared that he would never flee from a mere boy and demanded to know the meaning behind his defiant stare. His fury then twisted into a sinister grin. He feigned disinterest, claiming he had no business with Kazuma and was only worried about Kaiser. However, he conceded that Kazuma's presence here meant the situation had changed. As his men began to murmur in confusion, wondering if their leader was actually fleeing, Souza silenced them with a roar. He declared their departure a strategic retreat and, with a final shout of brat, leaped away from the confrontation. He watched the retreat with unwavering resolve, his gaze fixed on the fleeing figure. He called out that their duel was merely postponed until another day, instructing Souza to keep the Suryu spears safe for him until that time. Souza glanced back over his shoulder, a look of irritation on his face, and retorted that Kazuma should be the one to take care of it. Kazuma silently watched as the entire unit of masked soldiers followed their leader, vanishing into the distance. With the immediate threat gone, Garrett seized the opportunity, ordering a full retreat for his own forces. Kazuma watched the mounted soldiers depart, frustrated that his injured leg prevented him from giving chase. He could only watch them go, murmuring Garrett's name under his breath. He watches with wide, distressed eyes as Manhwa and Princess Arias tend to the fallen Garrett, calling out for him to open his eyes. The group gathers around the unconscious captain. Manhwa, holding his head, urgently tells him to hold on, while Kazuma and the others look on with grave concern. In a desperate bid to save him, Manhwa places her gloved hand over his chest wound, and a complex, glowing magical sigil materializes beneath her palm. The potent magic courses through Garrett. He remains unconscious, but his face twists in pain as he lets out a low groan. This sign of life startles the onlookers. Manhwa calls his name again, her voice filled with a mix of hope and urgency, pleading for him to stay conscious. His eyes finally flutter open. Manhwa cradles him, reassuring him that it's all right and explaining that Kazuma made the enemy retreat. Garrett's gaze weakly shifts to find Kazuma. Their eyes meet. Though clearly weakened, Garrett manages to ask if Kazuma is unharmed. Kazuma, his face smudged with dirt, offers a small, reassuring smile. Garrett then expresses his gratitude for protecting Her Highness once again. In response, Kazuma's expression turns somber as he quietly accepts the thanks. He confirms that he managed to protect Arias, but his downcast eyes and hesitant tone suggest a deeper, unspoken trouble weighing on his mind. His thoughts flash back to the battle. A deep crack splitting the earth, his own face frozen in shock while holding a spear, and a fleeting image of himself moving through the woods. The memory is fragmented and unsettling. He anxiously asks about the fate of the others, his voice heavy with concern. Garrett, now recovered, watches him with a grim understanding. The captain places a reassuring hand on Kazuma's shoulder, telling him that the others fulfilled their duty and that it is not something for him to worry about. He then turns his attention to Princess Arias, kneeling before her. He confesses that it was his duty to protect her and begs for forgiveness for failing to do so. His apology prompts an immediate, distressed reaction from Princess Arias, who shouts for him to stop as he prostrates himself fully on the ground. She insists that she is alive only because of him, Kazuma, and all the guards who protected her. For that reason, she tells him he has nothing to apologize for. Her heartfelt words seem to reach the captain, who looks up with a humbled expression. Kazuma and Manhwa observe the moment in silence. As the emotional weight of the moment settles, Princess Arias discreetly wipes a tear from her eye. Seeing this, Kazuma offers a small, gentle smile. Garrett, ever the protector, turns back to the princess. He reminds her that while he did use healing magic, she must not push herself too hard. His comment draws an immediate, indignant reaction from Manhwa. With puffed cheeks, she confronts the startled captain, questioning if what he said was truly acceptable. Faced with her clear displeasure, the captain is left stammering and flustered. Manhwa, with a final pout, reluctantly concedes, leaving Garrett looking utterly defeated. As Garrett stood by, Manhwa turned her attention to Kazuma, tapping him on the shoulder. She called out his name, but he seemed momentarily confused by her sudden concern. He then turned to Princess Arias, who insisted he must not push himself any further, pointing out the severity of his wounds. Kazuma simply agreed with a weary smile, while Manhwa looked on, flustered. As he agreed, a faint, intricate pattern of light momentarily flared across his hand and face. He winced, a silent acknowledgement that he truly couldn't push himself anymore. Seeing his discomfort, Princess Arias addressed the group. She suggested that once Kazuma's immediate treatment was finished, they should all return to the carriage. With a plan in place, the group made their way through the dense forest. Kazuma walked with a determined look, leading the way back towards their damaged transport. Upon reaching the clearing, the women watched with concern as Kazuma, instead of resting, immediately set to work on the broken carriage with a tool in his hand. He knelt by the shattered wheel, skillfully manipulating tools to mend the wood. Garrett stood guard nearby, observing the young man's unexpected expertise. A moment later, Kazuma looked up from his work with a satisfied expression. Garrett, watching him, wore a look of impressed contemplation. With the final piece in place, Garrett announced to the group that the repairs were complete. Garrett remarked that it was quite something for Kazuma to also possess a carpentry skill. Kazuma, however, dismissed the praise, turning towards the others and stating that there was something more important to address. He approaches the resting group, where Manhwa tends to a grievously wounded guard with white hair. Garrett, his torso bandaged, sits against a tree, Kazuma asks him about the state of his treatment. Garrett reports that his wounds seem to have closed up somehow. The female guard beside him looks on in astonishment, while Kazuma expresses his relief. He then apologizes for having been a burden. Looking over at the others, Garrett tells them they all did well, and that for now they should rest. As he speaks, Princess Arias listens with a somber expression, her eyes downcast. Kazuma glances over, noticing her quiet sorrow. The mood remains heavy as manhwa stands before 3 makeshift graves, each marked by a sword plunged into the earth. Kazuma walks toward her through the quiet clearing. He stops short as a memory surfaces, his eyes fix on the image of a body lying still in the tall grass. The memory sharpens, revealing the fallen white-haired guard he had seen manhwa treating earlier, now lifeless on the battlefield. His recollection continues, showing the grim sight of other fallen comrades as the survivors walk through the aftermath. Returning to the present, he thinks about how they were eventually found, but the others were not so fortunate. The thought concludes as he stands beside manhwa, who kneels to pray before the graves, both paying silent tribute to the fallen. Nearby, Princess Arias Sam Alexandros shed silent tears for the fallen, her gaze falling upon a single, resilient flower amidst the solemn scene. As she stood there, Kazuma moved to her side, his own expression heavy with the weight of their losses. He looked towards the makeshift graves, marked by the swords of their fallen comrades. He spoke softly, apologizing for his failure to save them. Despite the loss, he made a solemn vow to the departed, promising that he would see Princess Arias safely to the Ordana kingdom. His words hung in the air, a heavy promise over the silent graves. The 3 swords stood as lonely monuments against the turbulent sky, a testament to the sacrifice made. The carriage rumbled onward, a fragile sanctuary on a desolate road. Inside, Kazuma sat in grim silence, the recent battle weighing heavily on his mind. Their pursuers, the Grinwald division, had been formidable foes. He recalled the chaos of the fight. Somehow, in the midst of the fierce struggle, he had managed to level up. But it had come at a great cost. Their entire group was pushed to its absolute limit, barely escaping the overwhelming might of the armored commander. The cost of that escape was evident all around him. Princess Arias watched over her companions with a worried gaze. Garrett lay wounded, tended to by the female guard, while manhwa carefully bandaged Kazuma's own injuries. His thoughts were cut short as he looked out the window. The pursuit likely hadn't ended, and their situation remained perilous. Then, his eyes widened in surprise. "A town!" he exclaimed. At his cry, the others turned their attention to the window. Garrett, now sitting up shirtless, his back showing signs of the recent battle, joined Arias and manhwa in peering out into the distance. "I can see a town," Kazuma confirmed. Garrett pulled back the cloth flap of the carriage for a clearer view, his expression a mixture of disbelief and hope. "A town?" he questioned, just as Kazuma looked on with wide eyes. Through the opening, they saw it, a large settlement against the darkening sky. Kazuma breathed a sigh of relief, remarking that it was a big town and that they could make it inside before nightfall. Arias agreed, relieved. Garrett, however, remained cautious, wondering aloud what kind of town it could be. The town stood silhouetted against the twilight, its buildings clustered together with lights beginning to flicker on, a beacon of potential safety in the vast wilderness. Back inside the carriage, with Garrett resting again, manhwa knelt and spoke with quiet certainty. She believed it was the town of Darlam. The name hung in the air, met with surprised expressions from both Kazuma and Arias. She smiles with serene confidence, her eyes closed. Having been addressed by name, she replies with satisfaction, "You've understood well, haven't you?" Princess Arias, looking flustered, quickly apologizes for interrupting their conversation. Manhwa turns to her, dismissing the apology by saying it's nothing, while Garrett confirms their location from the front of the carriage. Darlam. The princess mentions that she has heard of the place, asking if it's a prosperous commercial town. Manhwa confirms that it is, adding that it's a very bustling city, to which Kazuma agrees with a simple yes. He turns to Manhwa, his curiosity piqued, and asks how she knew about the town. She smiles and explains that she is from this very region. Her explanation is followed by a quiet, contented smile as she closes her eyes and softly affirms her statement. Sometime later, inside a room at an inn, Kazuma surveys their temporary sanctuary. The wounded guards are finally able to rest on proper beds. He feels a wave of relief, grateful that they found the town and that his injured comrades can now recover. His gaze shifts to the window. He pulls back the curtain with a soft rustle, looking out upon the town of Darlam as evening settles in. Manhwa joins him at his side, her expression calm as she also takes in the view. He turns his head toward her, a faint smile on his lips, and remarks that the town is indeed as lively as she described. His directness seems to catch her by surprise, her eyes widening for a moment. She recovers quickly, a slight blush on her cheeks, as she confirms that Darlam is the most prosperous town in the entire region. Kazuma listens with an exaggerated, cheerful expression. Their conversation is interrupted by Garrett, who approaches from behind. He informs them that there's a large inn near the town's entrance, and asks if that would be a suitable place for them to stay. Both Kazuma and Manhwa turn, startled by his sudden interjection. As the group considered their options, Arias gazed up at a grand, multi-story building. She decided it was a good choice, a place where they could finally feel secure. Kazuma, however, questioned if such a large place was truly safe. Arias agreed with the choice, explaining that the bigger the establishment, the easier it would be for them to blend in with the crowds. His unease persisted. From a high vantage point, he scanned the sprawling town below, convinced that he could not afford to let his guard down. Not even here. Meanwhile, Garrett brought their covered wagon to a halt before the building, announcing that they had arrived. Inside the wagon, he and the other wounded guards rested. Seeing their fatigue, Manhwa stood with a cheerful smile and volunteered to handle all the lodging arrangements herself. She then stepped out, glancing back at Kazuma before turning and bowing politely to someone, asking for their attention. Her request, however, was directed at Garrett. She presented him with a small object, urging him to take it as Kazuma watched the exchange with wide-eyed surprise. The object was an ornate card, bearing a detailed crest, which she placed firmly in his hand. Rejoining the others, Kazuma voiced his hope that they could secure a room. Manhwa agreed, though she seemed nervous as she added that if they couldn't, they would have to start searching all over again. He let out a worried sigh. Arius then remarked that it would be suspicious if a larger inn even existed in this town, and if that were the case, they would be in trouble. He watched as Manhwa turned back towards him. Her expression won a mild surprise. The entire group waited in tense silence outside the Grand Inn, the outcome of their request still uncertain. A moment later, her face, bright with relief, appeared from behind a curtain. She called out to everyone, announcing that it was settled and she had secured their rooms. Kazuma could only stare, wondering if it was truly possible. Her triumphant declaration was met with a formal reception. A man with an impressive mustache and turban, flanked by his staff, bowed deeply. He welcomed them warmly, inviting them to step inside. As they moved forward, the manager addressed Princess Arius directly, offering to have their luggage taken care of. She graciously accepted his hospitality on behalf of the group. The man then addressed them all, noting that he had heard they'd run into some trouble. A bead of sweat formed on Kazuma's temple as the manager smiled and gestured for them to follow him further into the inn.